The Webster Dictionary definition of suspicion is rather lacking in its ability to clearly denote the insidiousness which affects the ensnared mind at its inception. Suspicion is more like a tiny worm that bores its way into the psyche and takes up residence there. It can lie dormant for weeks or months, but it never dies. It hibernates quietly in the recesses of the mind, waiting to be fed with more doubt. Suspicion is the dark side of the mind. There is no joy or happiness where suspicion is present. It can paralyze its victim into non-action, or create a state of numbness which robs the victim of their ability to reason correctly. Why am I so obsessed with the word suspicion? The simple answer is that all the devastating events of the past 2 months started with a small, unexpected observation which planted the worm of suspicion in my mind. Up until that event occurred, I would never have had the slightest doubt of the faithfulness of my wife of 14 years. 5 days of the week I'm awake before my wife and the children. I have formed this routine which has me slipping out of bed and moving quietly into the exercise room located in the basement. I have several modern exercise machines which permit me to work out undisturbed for a half hour or more while the rest of the family is sleeping upstairs. A vigorous workout on the bench press and the treadmill wakes up my entire body. It was a Monday morning when I woke up a little earlier than normal. Rather than lie in bed for another 15 minutes, I got up and headed down to the exercise room. I finished my workout early and headed back upstairs to shower and get dressed for work. Jessica was not in the bed as I walked into the bedroom. I opened the bathroom door in one quick motion and stepped inside. Jessica was standing there about to put on her bra. I smiled at her, and then my eyes caught the sight of a strange dark black and blue mark on Jessica's left breast. The mark was oval-shaped, about the size of a $50. My eyes flashed up from the dark mark and locked onto Jessica's surprised face. There, in the space of about 20 milliseconds, was a look I had never seen in Jessica's eyes. Those eyes flashed a strong sense of guilt as her mind registered the fact I had just seen the dark mark on her breast. It was as if I had caught her in some type of act. The look of guilt quickly changed to a look of shame as she turned her body away from me and proceeded to put her bra on. No words were spoken in that very brief but embarrassing moment. Jessica smiled as she moved past me and out of the bathroom. I stood there dumbfounded, trying to get my mind around the situation which took place in that very brief encounter. My mind would not let go of the sight of the dark mark on Jessica's breast. It sure looked like a love bite, a hickey caused by an intense sucking on one spot of flesh. What was it really? Why was it there? Did Jessica bruise herself in some manner to get that black and blue mark? My mind was not willing to accept the other alternative explanation for the origin of her bruise. The warm water washed over my body as I stood in the shower. I tried my best to expunge the incident from my mind. The best I was able to do was to push it back inside my mind as I began to think of the workday that lay ahead of me. At the breakfast table, Jessica was her normal, upbeat self as she hurried around, getting me and the kids ready for the new day. Michael and Emily had their usual sibling nitpicking at each other while they finished their breakfast and headed out the door to catch the school bus. "I saw you looking at the bruise mark on my breast in the bathroom," Jessica said as she finally sat down across from me at the table. "I injured myself yesterday at work. There was an open file drawer I bumped into and hit my breast against it. It was really dumb of me, and it left a small black and blue mark." Her face was calm and nonchalant as she shrugged her shoulders as if to indicate there wasn't anything more to say about the bruise. Normally, I would not have given the matter any more thought, except there was the momentary look of guilt in Jessica's eyes when I first saw the bruise. It was the look that her explanation could not satisfy in my mind. I just nodded my head and finished eating my toast. We did our usual hug and kiss as I walked out of the kitchen and into the garage. Jessica would leave for work about 15 or 20 minutes after I left. There was a lot on my mind about the customer meeting which was scheduled for this morning. The bathroom encounter and Jessica's explanation dropped off my radar screen as I drove to work. But unknown to me, the worm of suspicion had been planted in my mind. It just burrowed itself inside and went to sleep. Jessica, my beautiful 37-year-old wife, and I live what many would call the ideal American lifestyle. We live in a nice neighborhood of upper-middle-class suburbia. We are both college graduates and have professional careers which we constantly balance with each other and our two children. Michael, our oldest child, is 12 years old. He is a bundle of energy that rivals the Energizer Bunny. There are middle school music lessons, swimming, soccer practice, and soccer games which keep him very busy. Emily is our 10-year-old daughter. She is her daddy's little princess. Even during her early years, she had mastered the feminine skills that can bend and wrap me around her little finger, just as in most other father-daughter relations. I know I am being manipulated, but I am helpless to defend myself when she turns on her sweet charms. My name is John Harris. I am a year older than my wife. I have been employed at the Alpha Corp for the past 11 years. My current position is that of section manager responsible for the maintenance department located at the corporate headquarters. There are 22 people in my department who have maintenance assignments ranging from heating and air conditioning equipment to computer and telephone installation. It isn't a very stressful job for me. I have very talented people working for me who know their jobs better than I do. Rarely do I have to do any business traveling. Once or twice a year, I attend a conference or seminar on new innovations in building maintenance. Jessica has gone with me on several of these out-of-town business trips. Jessica is the director of human relations of the local TV cable company in our area. The high level of job responsibility makes Jessica feel very good about herself. In addition, her job has also done wonders for her self-esteem. After our daughter was born, Jessica thought her professional life was over, and she would be relegated to the status of Susie homemaker and a stay-at-home mom. By the time Emily was 3 years old, it was obvious that Jessica would need to get some outside activity which would challenge her more than cleaning up after toddlers and making meals. At first, Jessica was torn between her guilt and depression. She felt guilty that she could not cope with the demands of being a full-time mommy. Yet she was depressed over the fact that all of her college education was ebbing away without ever being fully utilized. All of that changed when Jessica's sister, Jennifer, moved into the same neighborhood. Jennifer and Jessica were total opposites. Jennifer Hunter was the consummate mother and homemaker. She had no desire to challenge the world with her business acumen or to be some eye candy at a receptionist's desk. Motherhood suited her just fine. Having her husband, Tim, being the principal breadwinner was the way life was supposed to be in Jennifer's mind. The Hunters have 3 children, a boy and 2 girls. Alan was the oldest, followed by Alexis and Alyssa, his twin sisters. It didn't take long for our 2 children to become adopted by their Aunt Jennifer and for them to spend much of their free time at their cousin's house. This was a blessing for Jessica. She and Jennifer worked out an arrangement which allowed Jessica to begin pursuing a professional career while her sister would be the den mother. That was 7 years ago. Jessica landed her ideal position with CableNet, the local TV cable company. She was hired as human relations manager, reporting to the regional managing director. The job was everything Jessica had hoped for in a job. It gave her a sense of accomplishment, and at the same time gave her some freedom away from the office. One of her major job responsibilities was the interviewing of potential subcontractors for CableNet. She had to ensure that any subcontractor hired by CableNet complied with all of the state and federal hiring guidelines. Several weeks after the encounter in the bathroom with Jessica's bruised breast, I was reviewing the proposal specifications for a new telephone exchange system for the corporate offices. I discovered a number of important items had been overlooked in the draft proposal. I took to task the 2 employees directly responsible for writing up the specifications. Although it was unusual for these 2 employees to screw up, I gave them a good dressing down and sent them off to correct the draft. This incident had frazzled my already tense nerves. The entire order would have been seriously compromised if I had not caught the error in the draft. I decided I needed to get out of the office for the rest of the day and do some stress-relieving exercising at the gym. As I left the office, I told my secretary I would be gone for the rest of the day and to only call me if a 911-type tragedy happened to the company. She smiled at me and just nodded her head. The next 2 hours were spent in a heavy workout at the gym, which included swimming 50 laps in the large pool. Several minutes in the steam room and a nice hot shower made me feel like a new man. It was 1:30 in the afternoon when I walked out of the gym. For a quick second, I thought about returning to the office. My refreshed mind quickly squelched that idea. Let the group run itself for the rest of the day. As I was driving home, a nasty thought flashed across my mind. I had read and heard stories about husbands returning home unannounced to find their wives in the bedroom with a lover. I smiled at that thought. Jessica would never be unfaithful to me. Then the little worm of suspicion in my psyche wiggled its ugly head, and the thought of the guilty look in Jessica's eyes gave me a twinge of doubt for a split second. I pulled into the driveway. No strange cars in the driveway. The garage door went up. No cars in the garage either. The children were still at school, and Jessica would be at work for another 2 hours. Peace and quiet, all for myself. As I entered the silent house, after quickly changing into some sweatpants and a shirt, I went into the den and put on some smooth jazz. I no sooner sat down in my recliner to relax when the phone began to ring. Damn it anyway, I thought to myself as I got up to answer the phone. It better not be the office calling. "Hello," I said as I picked up the phone. "Is this the Harris residence?" A female voice on the other end spoke. My mind first jumped to thinking this was a telemarketer making one of those annoying sales solicitation calls. "Yes, it is. Who is this calling?" I sounded annoyed as I challenged the caller. "Oh, I'm sorry to have bothered you. I was wanting to talk to Jessica Harris." The female voice sounded very apologetic. "She's still at work. Can I take a message for her?" I wanted to end this interruption and get back to my solitude and my glass of Jack Daniels. "Would you be so kind?" "This is Nancy Lee. I wanted to call her and tell her about the cost to get my car repaired." My mind jumped for a minute. Jessica didn't mention anything to me about a Nancy Lee. "Can you give me the information, Nancy?" My voice had now changed to a more pleasant tone as my curiosity had piqued. "Yes. Tell Jessica the body repair shop said the cost would not exceed $450 for the tail light and dent in the fender." Nancy's voice sounded like a middle-aged woman. "All right, Nancy. Tell me more about the accident and what happened." My voice was nonchalant, hoping that Nancy would fill in all the details. "Well, it was last week Thursday when Jessica backed into my car in the parking lot. She didn't do any damage to her car, but the edge of her bumper smashed the taillight lens and made a small dent in the fender. It wasn't very bad, so Jessica told me to get an estimate, and she would pay the cost of repair. She didn't want to report it to the insurance company. I can understand why she wouldn't want to do that. Those insurance companies will raise your premiums at the slightest chance. It sounded to me like two women solving all the world's problems in a parking lot. So, I imagine they have these kinds of accidents all the time in the mall parking lot," I said to Nancy as I scribbled a note for Jessica. "Yes, I imagine mall parking lot accidents occur all the time," Nancy said as I was about to end the conversation. "But this one occurred at the Pine Tree Motel parking lot." Wham! My mind snapped up at that last statement. "So Jessica was at the motel a week ago on Thursday, and she backed her car into your car. Is that correct, Nancy?" I tried to make my voice sound natural and not convey the tightness that was gripping my chest. "Yes, that's correct. I had gone over to see my sister, who was staying at the motel. My husband does not like my sister at all, so I have to meet her at the motel whenever she comes to town. I was getting out of my car when Jessica backed out of her parking space. She must not have seen my car behind her when she bumped into it. It was a good thing she wasn't going very fast, or the damage would have been greater." I thought for a moment about what question to ask Nancy next. Too much chaos in my mind. So I just asked, "Is there anything else about the accident you can remember, Nancy?" "Well, nothing other than to thank the man who came over to look at the damage and tell me that my car was still very drivable. But he said I should get it fixed before the police gave me a ticket for driving with a broken tail light." Was Jessica upset by the accident? I could hear her take a deep breath as she thought for a second. Yes, she was. That was until the kind gentleman came over to assess the damage. He was so helpful about the incident that he calmed us both down. Did the man work for the motel, I asked? No, I don't think so. In fact, I think Jessica knew him, although she didn't say that she knew him. I wanted to ask her what this kind gentleman looked like, but that might have raised some suspicion on Nancy's part. She might think she gave me more information than she should have. Well, thank you, Nancy. I'll give this information to Jessica when she comes home. Does she have your telephone number? I gave her my number when she gave me her business card. I asked her for her home number also, which she wrote down on the back of her card just in case she lost your phone number. Nancy, could you give it to me again? She gave me her number, both home and cell phone. Thank you, Nancy. I'll give this information to Jessica as soon as she gets home this evening. We said our goodbyes and hung up. I sat back in the chair and looked up at the ceiling. My thoughts were bouncing around inside my head. What now? What was this all about? Jessica had not mentioned anything about a car accident to me. That was something she would have surely told me as soon as she saw me. Also, why would Jessica be at the Pine Tree Motel on a Thursday afternoon? The answer could be as simple as her interviewing a new subcontractor at the motel restaurant. There didn't have to be anything clandestine about her being at the motel in the afternoon. I was trying to rationalize this latest bit of unsettling information which had just come to my attention. There could be 100 different harmless answers which could explain her being at that motel. Still, in the back of my mind, the worm of suspicion stirred once again. Maybe it is the worst possible answer. Maybe Jessica has a lover. How would I ever know for sure? It took 2 more Jack Daniels to calm my nerves. By then, the kids came racing in from school. They gave their usual hello, Dad, and headed upstairs to their rooms. Emily came down about a half hour later and went into the kitchen to start the supper that Jessica had prepared before she went to work. I was still sitting in the recliner trying to relax when I heard the garage door open and Jessica came in. She walked over and kissed me on the top of my head. "You're home early, John. Anything wrong at work?" she asked as she rubbed her hand along my cheek. "Nothing major. I just left early to go to the gym for a workout and a swim. I needed to do some stress relieving." My smile never gave any hint of the turmoil going on inside my mind. Emily shouted out that supper was just about ready to put on the table, so Jessica turned away and went upstairs to change clothes. Supper time was the usual chatter among the 4 of us as we ate and talked about our day. Michael was giving an update on the science project he was working on with his school friend Ethan. Emily was chattering away about her English class and the book report which was due next week. It was the typical suburban family enjoying each other and sharing the important things of the day. Jessica mentioned that her company was expanding their coverage territory, and she was very busy lining up subcontractors to help with the cable installations. I sat there taking in all this wonderful chatter, thinking what a wonderful family I was a part of. "What about you, Dad? How was your day?" Emily asked as she gave me her daddy's little girl smile. It was a little more stressful than usual at work. There was a major mistake in the latest telephone specifications. I nearly blew my top at the group. Instead, I gave them instructions on what needed to be fixed, and then I left the office for the rest of the day. I went to the gym for a good stress-busting workout, and then I came home to relax with my loving family. I smiled back at Emily. Tomorrow will certainly be a better day in the neighborhood. I winked at her as she giggled at my remark. I looked across the table at Jessica and then spoke. "Oh, by the way, Jessica, a Nancy Lee called this afternoon while I was here to tell you she got the estimate to get the damage to her car repaired." Nothing in the tone of my voice gave any hint of my concern. Jessica almost choked on the food she was swallowing. Our eyes locked for a second. There again was a surprised look of guilt in her eyes, the same look that appeared when I walked in on her in the bathroom and saw the bruise mark on her breast. Her facial expression was one of shock and instant fear. "She would like you to call her tonight. Her car is at the repair shop and she wants to talk to you about the cost." The initial estimate is around 450. There was no accusatory tone in my voice as I waited for Jessica to reply. I could see Jessica's mind was working at 100 miles per hour as she was formulating a response in her mind. She lowered her eyes to look at the food on her plate, but it was obvious she couldn't continue to look me directly in the eyes. "What else did Nancy say about the accident?" Jessica finally said in a low voice. "Mom had an accident?" Michael blurted out as his eyes opened wider at the prospect of some exciting news. "I guess so, Michael. It seems that Mom backed into this lady's car in a parking lot." My reply cut off Jessica's answer. "Gee, Mom, when did this happen? Was anybody hurt?" It was Emily's turn to jump into the conversation. "Slow down, you two. Give your mother a chance to tell us all about it." I tried to hush the children down so Jessica could talk. "Did Nancy say anything else about the accident?" Jessica asked her question again. "Not that I can recall. She seemed like she was in a hurry or something. I lied, something I had never done to my wife. Was it a little white lie, or was it a lie of entrapment?" Jessica seemed relieved for the moment. It was just a minor fender bender in the parking lot. No one was hurt, and there was no damage to my car. The bumper of my car broke the lady's tail light and made a small dent in her fender. That's all that happened. No additional details were forthcoming. I was kind of disappointed. "When did this happen, Mom? Where did this happen?" Michael jumped back in with his questions. "It happened last week Wednesday. I went to the mall to get a birthday gift for Carol at work. Thursday was her birthday, and I needed to get a gift for her," Jessica replied in a calm, matter-of-fact voice. "You were at the mall, and you didn't take me." Emily looked at her mom with surprise. Mall shopping for Emily ranked up there with having a slumber party with all of her girlfriends. I ran over to the mall at lunchtime. It was a quick in-and-out trip. I got Carol a silk scarf along with a charm for her bracelet, Jessica replied as Emily had a childish pout on her face. Maybe Nancy was wrong about the day. Maybe it was Wednesday and not Thursday, as she said on the phone. But I don't think she could be that wrong about where the accident occurred. Why did Jessica have to change the location and the day? The suspicion worm burrowed deeper into my conscious mind. That look in Jessica's eyes, the shocked expression on her face. What is going on behind those eyes? What is my loving wife trying to conceal from me? "So it was no big deal, huh, Mom?" Michael said in a disappointed voice. I guess he was hoping for a more dramatic accident. A broken tail light didn't raise his level of interest. "That's right, Michael. No big deal. It's just that Carol's gift is going to cost me more than I really wanted to pay," Jessica said with a soft smile on her face. She seemed to have recovered her composure very quickly. I didn't pursue the issue any further. Later that evening, the children were up in their rooms doing their homework. Jessica had gone off to our bedroom to return Nancy's call. Maybe she wanted to talk to Nancy in private. I didn't question why she needed some privacy for the call. The stereo was playing and the TV was off as I sat in the den. There was an open book on my lap and a Jack Daniels in my hand. My mind was in its most analytical mode at this time. It was slowly and methodically going over the past several months, trying to uncover any more clues or unusual events which might further support a theory of infidelity that was forming in my mind. Nothing, not a single thing except that bruise mark, during those months would make me suspect anything had changed in our relationship. Our sex life had not suddenly gotten better or gotten worse. Jessica was still the same loving and considerate wife. She didn't dress differently. She didn't go on business trips or have to work late evening hours. So why won't this suspicion in my mind go away? But there was that look in her eyes twice, a look I had never seen before. Her facial expression of surprise and guilt for only a fleeting second could not be explained away. And now the lying about the car accident. These ugly thoughts were causing my chest muscles to tighten. I told Nancy to have her car repaired, and I would pay the repair shop as soon as the work was done, Jessica said as she entered the room. Her words snapped my mind back to the present tense. She gave me an inquisitive look as if she expected me to say something more about the accident. I didn't comment or ask any questions. I'm sorry I didn't mention the accident the day it happened, honey. I just was very tense over the incident, and I didn't want you to stress over it. I was going to tell you after I got the call from Nancy. It seems you got her call first. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Jessica sat down on the sofa across from me. I had the feeling there was something she was still concerned about, but she didn't know how to broach the subject. Maybe she found out that Nancy told me where and when the accident really happened. Maybe she was wanting me to question her about the discrepancy in her story. I'm glad you settled the matter with Nancy. I'm glad it wasn't any more serious, was my simple reply. After my response, Jessica seemed a little more relieved. Aren't you going to watch Lost tonight on TV? It is on tonight, isn't it? Her question seemed now to put the accident incident to rest. No sense in her mind to dwell on this sticky issue. No, I think I'll skip the show for now. I have enough convoluted mystery going on at this time. I'll let Jack and the rest of the crew on the island manage by themselves this week. I smiled at her and took another sip of my drink. Well then, I think I'll go upstairs and pour myself a hot tub filled with bubble bath. Then I'll soak in it till my skin turns pink, Jessica said as she got up from the sofa and walked over to me with a smile on her face. She leaned over and kissed me on the forehead. Would you check on the kids before you come to bed? I want to make sure their homework is done and make sure they don't stay up too late. Her voice was the same sweet, loving voice that I've come to know and love for these past 14 years. Sure will, lover. I'll crack the whip if I have to tame those two monsters of ours. Now go and enjoy your soak in the tub. I made a kissing sound with my lips as she smiled and walked toward the stairs. Don't stay up too late, lover boy. I'll be in bed waiting for you, she giggled as she walked up the steps. Jessica is one sexy and passionate woman when she gets in the mood. A hot bubble bath always gets her in the mood. I knew we were in for a hot night between the sheets when I came up to bed. My first thought was how those suspicions might affect my intimate feelings toward the woman I love and worship. I had no tangible proof of any infidelity on her part. Nothing but this nagging worm of suspicion that wouldn't go away. An hour later, I shut everything off downstairs and went up to check on the kids. Michael was intent on the video game he held in his hand. Okay, young man, show me the homework assignment, I said as I quickly snatched the Game Boy out of his hands. Oh, Dad, I was just about to get to the 10th level. Now you messed it all up, Michael said with a pout on his face. You'll have all summer to get to the 12th level if that's your goal. Right now, we're trying to get you through the 6th grade at school. I poked him gently in the ribs. Now the homework, young man. Emily was already in bed. She heard the noise from her brother in the other bedroom. Now she wanted to play the daddy's little girl routine on me. It always worked. I kissed her goodnight and turned the light off. Sex that night with Jessica was incredible. We spooned our bodies together in a lover's embrace and fell into a peaceful sleep. That Saturday, Jessica and her sister went off to do some girl shopping. The children were over playing with their cousins while Tim had the babysitting responsibility. Lucky me had nothing special to do and a quiet house all to myself. Since I was restless, I decided to wash both of our cars. Jennifer had driven her SUV, so Jessica's car was still in the garage. It was a great day outside, so I took my time washing and vacuuming the two cars. I cleaned the carpets and then did the trunks of both cars. While I was vacuuming the trunk of Jessica's car, I saw a small piece of white plastic sticking up from the edge of the wheel well compartment. I pulled back the mat and found a white bag lying on top of the spare tire. When I opened the bag, my heart almost stopped inside my chest. Inside the bag were several intimate apparel items, including a sexy lace bra, panties, garter belt, and black stockings. The items looked like something a woman would buy at Victoria's Secret. I had never seen these garments before. All of the sale tags were removed from them, so I knew they were not brand new, and they looked like they had been worn before. Sure, it'll continue from where I left off. The crotch and the panties had a distinct smell of female odor, Jessica's smell. I stood there, dumbfounded, looking at a bag full of garments which had only one purpose. Was I holding the smoking gun in my hand? Was this the missing link in the story I had been forcing myself to deny for the past several weeks? I put everything back in the bag and returned the bag where I found it. I put away the cleaning equipment and put Jessica's car back in the garage. Anyone who might have seen me at that moment would surely think they were watching a robot or a zombie walking around the cars. I was in a daze. My mind refused to function correctly. Nothing but chaos and confusion reigned inside my mind. Finally, I locked up the house and drove to the corner convenience store. I bought a 6-pack of beer and then drove over to the lake. There was a secluded parking place away from the weekend crowd. Sitting back with a cold beer in my hand, I tried to make some sense of the events of the past couple of weeks. Until I found the lingerie in the trunk of Jessica's car, all I had were vague suspicions that Jessica might have been unfaithful. Now, with the latest discovery, could there be any doubt of her infidelity? I didn't think there could be any other reasonable explanation. Still, I had no idea of what I should do next. Confront her immediately? Demand explanations and proof of her fidelity? Should I remain silent until I had definite, undeniable proof? But even then, what would I do with the damning evidence? Should I divorce her? My mind, which is usually very good at analyzing problems, was failing me miserably. There seemed to be no win-win solution to the dilemma if, in fact, Jessica had cheated on our marriage. It took several hours to finish the 6-pack of beer. The sun was setting on the horizon across the lake. I felt a slight buzz from the alcohol, but I was far from being intoxicated. I also realized I was hungry and needed to get home. But how was I going to act when I got home? What kind of existence would I have to live to maintain the status quo? The missing part of the equation was Jessica's explanation for all of my suspicions. Could she have rational reasons which would dispel all of my doubts? I arrived home to find Jessica on the phone. She turned and looked at me as I entered the house, her face filled with worry and concern. "My God, John, where have you been all afternoon? You had us worried sick. You weren't here when Jennifer and I got back from shopping. Tim didn't know where you were either." There was a high level of angst in her voice as she put down the phone. I walked into the kitchen area and got a glass of cold water from the refrigerator. Our eyes never connected until I sat down at the table. I was out at the lake. I have a lot on my mind that I needed to think about and try to sort out. I looked up at her and our eyes locked. I could see the fear in her eyes. There was fear mixed with anxiety as her mind was trying to assess the words from the person sitting at the table. "What's wrong, John? Are you sick or something?" Her words were full of concern, but they did not convey the dread she was feeling inside. "Yes, you could say I'm sick, but it's not a physical illness. I'm sick in my soul." At that moment, Jessica's stoic demeanor crumbled before my eyes. There was no doubt in her mind that I knew her secret. She slowly sank down on one of the kitchen chairs. "What's his name? Are you in love with him?" My voice was calm, no anger or accusing tone of voice. Jessica looked at me as tears welled up in her eyes. "His name is Mark Roberts. And yes, I am in love with him." I just sat there looking at my sobbing wife. Her brief confession did not stun me. It did not make me sick to my stomach. The suspicions I had about her infidelity had just been confirmed. Now the angst he'd been living with since I found her stash of sexy lingerie in the trunk of her car washed out of me, leaving me an empty emotional shell. "If you are in love with him, I guess that means the end of our marriage." My voice was still calm. "Oh God, no, John," Jessica cried out as a terrified look spread across her face. "I still love you, John. My love for Mark does not diminish the love I have for you." Jessica's voice cracked and her body shook as if she had just gotten a blast of cold air. "Well, you're sadly mistaken if you think I will ever accept the role of a cuckold, and I do not wish to live with a woman who professes her love for another man. I can see no other recourse for us except divorce." I moved out of the kitchen area and into the den where I slumped down in my favorite recliner. I did not want to look at my unfaithful wife any longer. To me, the decision for a divorce was now a foregone conclusion. It took several minutes for Jessica to regain her composure enough to speak to me. She sat on the sofa across from me, quietly for a moment before she spoke. I know this must be a terrible shock to you, John, finding out I have been unfaithful to you. But I really think you should listen to my explanation before you end our marriage." She tried to speak in a soft, loving voice, but I just turned my face away from hers. "Tell me one thing, Jessica. Do you still want to have a sexual relationship with this Mark guy?" She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and simply answered, "Yes." "Then there is nothing left of our marriage. Since you are the adulterous partner, I will file the divorce papers in the morning. I will seek primary custody of the children. I do not wish to expose my young, impressionable children to an adulterous environment. If you want Mark as your lover, then it will have to be without having custody of the children." My voice had taken on an aggressive tone. It was time to exert my position as the head of the family and the aggrieved husband. Jessica's infidelity may have wounded my ego, but I was not about to roll over and let her have the children. "Please, John, don't do this. I told you I still love you. I don't want a divorce, and I especially do not want to have my children taken away from me." Jessica was sobbing and trembling again as the reality of my decision was setting into her mind. "Your 'I love you' statement is a farce when you also profess your love for another man. Your actions speak louder than any of your words. Your actions tell me I'm not the man who can completely satisfy you as a woman. I cannot and will not accept a cuckold position." I hung my head and in a softer voice said, "I want you to pack a suitcase and leave this house immediately. I no longer want to be in the same house with you. You have lost your right to be a resident in this house. No, John, you can't just throw me out like an old shoe. This is my home. My children and I live here." Jessica was nearly in hysterics as I rose to my feet. "I live here. I live here with my children. You are an adulterous woman, and I won't have you living in the same house with us." I shouted at her as my anger rose inside me. "Now get your clothes packed and leave this house. I'm going to get the kids at Jennifer's, and when I get back, I don't want to find you in this house." I walked to the door, turned, and said, "I'll be back in an hour. Don't be here. Tell Jennifer where you will be staying, and I'll see that you get the rest of your belongings." I closed the door behind me as Jessica continued to beg me to reconsider. As soon as I walked into the Hunter's house, Tim could see there was something terribly wrong. He had never seen me looking so distraught. "What the hell has happened to you, John?" Tim asked as he walked over to me. "Bad, Tim. Very bad," I said as I leaned against the wall. I rolled my head from side to side slowly as I spoke. "Jessica has gotten herself a lover, and she doesn't want to end the affair. It's over for the two of us. I told her to pack some clothes and leave the house. They'll be filing for divorce in the morning." Tim stood there stunned at the words I had just spoken. There was never any sign that our marriage was in trouble. Just the opposite. Jessica and I appeared to be the ideal married couple with two lovely children. Just then, Jennifer came around the corner and saw us standing there in shocked silence. "What's going on here?" Her eyes moved rapidly back and forth from her husband's face to my face. "John just found out that Jessica has been cheating on him," Tim said sadly as he looked hard at his wife. "Do you know anything about this? Jessica tells you everything, doesn't she?" Jennifer's face could not hide the fact that she knew about Jessica's secret. "She didn't tell me everything, only that she had met her long-lost high school sweetheart. She didn't tell me she was sleeping with him." Her voice wasn't that convincing. "So you knew something was not right with this, didn't you, Jennifer?" I barked at her in an accusing voice. I tried to tell her not to get involved with Mark. Their relationship in high school was in the past, and she should not jeopardize her marriage trying to relive some teenage fantasy. Her eyes were now focused on a spot on the floor. She couldn't look me directly in the eyes. "How long ago was this, Jennifer?" I snapped at her. "About 8 weeks ago," Jennifer said in a small voice. "What else do you know?" My anger was still building. "Jessica told me Mark owns a small construction company. He didn't know Jessica worked for CableNet when he applied for subcontracting work." Jessica was shocked when she first saw his name on the application form. Jennifer moved out of the hallway and sat down on the sofa. Her head was bowed as if in embarrassment. After she told me she met Mark for lunch, she no longer talked to me about him. I tried to find out if anything was going on between them. She refused to talk to me about Mark. Jennifer let out a deep sigh. I had a dark suspicion that she was beginning an affair with Mark. Tim had not said anything as his wife confessed her knowledge of the contact between Jessica and Mark. He had no idea of what to do or say at this time. "God damn women!" I shouted at my sister-in-law. "Even though she is your sister, you should have told Tim or me that something might be happening with Jessica. Now it's too late. Our marriage is over." I told Jessica to pack her bags and get out of my house. The veins in my neck were very pronounced as my anger was getting out of control. Terror flashed in her eyes as Jennifer looked up at me. "You're not throwing Jessica out into the street. She's your wife, and I know she loves you, John." Jennifer was now beginning to cry out loud. She also told me she loves Mark and that she wants to continue her affair with him. I shouted back at her, "That goddamn woman deserves to be out on the street." I knew I had to get away from Jennifer before my rage exploded out of control. "Where's Michael and Emily?" I turned to Tim. "They're in the backyard playing," Tim said as I turned and walked to the back door. The phone was ringing on the end table as I walked out to get the children. The two youngsters ran over to me as soon as they saw me. "Come on, gang. Let's go and get some burgers at Mickey's," I said with a forced smile on my face. "Can the three of them come with us, Dad?" Emily asked with a girlish smile on her face. "Sure they can, if their mother and father say it's okay," I replied. "Let's go in and ask them," Emily called out to the others as she raced inside the house. Jennifer was on the phone talking to Jessica. "Why was Aunt Jennifer crying when I went into the house?" Emily asked from the back seat of the car. "She's having a bad day. I think she got some bad news that disturbed her," I replied to my daughter. "Is that why she said she wanted Alan, Alexis, and Alyssa to stay home tonight, Dad?" Michael interrupted the conversation. "I guess so, Michael. There's a lot of things going on right now that will upset a lot of people. We can talk more about this when we get home." Michael and Emily were finishing up their French fries when I turned away from them and pushed the speed dial button on my cell phone. The phone rang several times. Then a female voice answered. "Hello?" It was Jennifer's voice. In a quiet voice, I said to her, "We're going to be leaving here shortly, and when we get home, Jessica better not be there." The children were more interested in the things going on around them to pay any attention to my phone conversation. "John, be reasonable. Jessica is having a major emotional crisis over this. She has no place to go, and she doesn't want to be without her children. Jennifer was trying to be the mediator for her sister. I don't give a damn where she goes. She can go live with her new lover for all I give a damn." My rage was building again. She better not be there when we get home, or the children will find out the hard way what a cheating and immoral woman their mother really is. I pressed the off button and took a deep breath as I tried to suppress my anger. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Emily asked as she saw the strange look on my face. I tried my best to smile and acted nonchalant. "Nothing really, sweetie. We'll talk more when we get home." The house was empty when the three of us arrived home. "Where's Mommy?" they both asked as they saw the empty house. "She had something she needs to do. Mommy will be away for a while things get straightened out." I sidestepped the serious answer to the children's question. "Now get upstairs to your rooms. I want that homework done in the next hour. I'll be up to tuck you in and say goodnight." When I walked into the bedroom, I noticed there were a lot of Jessica's clothes missing on her side of the master closet. Her cosmetics were also missing from the vanity in the bathroom. Even though my anger was still paramount, I felt a strong sense of loss as the reality of Jessica's absence set in. Still, I knew there would be more anguishing moments lying ahead of me. I lay back in the dark bedroom looking up at the ceiling. There were so many details I would have to address in the immediate future. Most important would be the emotional health and well-being of my two children. How do you tell your children that their mother will no longer be living with them? That she will not be there to love and comfort them every night? That she will not be there to be Dr. Mom when they are sick? In my own mind, I was struggling with my decision to fight for custody of the children. I wanted them to grow up happy and healthy, Would they be better off living with their mother and her new lover? Maybe it was my wounded ego. Maybe it truly was my devotion to my children. But I soon rejected the idea. I could not give up the children to my adulterous wife. I would fight tooth and nail to have them continue to live here with me. The next several days were traumatic and heart-wrenching for me. I immediately began the divorce process through my attorney. I was able to get a restraining order against Jessica from coming in contact with me or the children. Jessica hired a lawyer and was fighting the restraining order, but the results would take a week or more in the courts. Michael and Emily were now confused and upset with the events which were happening in their once happy and loving home. I had sat down with them and tried to explain that their mommy and daddy were having some serious problems remaining married to each other. The children could not understand what was happening and why their parents could not just kiss and make up. I told them there were issues which were too serious to just forget about. I did not specifically tell them about their mother's new lover. As gut-wrenching as these episodes were with the children, I was determined to stick to my position. When I finally talked to Jessica on the phone a week after I made her move out of the house, I issued my first threats to her. I told her there are laws in our state against alienation of affection by a third party. I told Jessica if she insisted on fighting the issue of my custody of the children, I would file charges against Mark and sue him for alienation of affection and destruction of our marriage. I also told her I would report her affair to the senior executives at CableNet as a conflict of interest on her part. She would probably be fired from her job, and Mark's company would be prohibited from doing business with CableNet. Jessica continued to plead with me to cancel the divorce actions and let her return home. These pleas were met with my sarcastic remarks about her having made her choice. I made it quite clear I would not be a cuckold or live in an open marriage arrangement. Adding to the insults, I told her that I was never interested in sloppy seconds and I don't keep damaged goods. The phone call ended with Jessica still pleading with me to reconsider. Next, I had a long talk with my sister-in-law about Michael and Emily visiting with their cousins. I told her in no uncertain terms that I would not permit Jessica to be at Jennifer's house if the children were there. I set down the rules of conduct that would govern my relationship with the Hunter family. Jennifer finally capitulated to my demands for the sake of the 5 children. She knew if I would restrict or cancel the visiting between the cousins, both families would suffer. The divorce papers were drawn up with me as the primary caregiver and having custody of the children. Jessica took my threats seriously and withdrew her objections to that part of the arrangement. She would have visitation rights on every other weekend, provided her lover was not present during those visitations. She would pick up and drop off the children at her sister's house, so I would not have to be present when she came to their house. This mutual agreement permitted the divorce process to continue. A month after Jessica moved out of the house, I looked into the bathroom mirror and saw a man who had aged 10 years in the space of 4 weeks. Every evening, the children pressed me about making up with their mother so she could move back in with us. These confrontations were taking their toll on the 3 of us. In addition to losing my wife, I now felt I was on the verge of losing the love of my children. I took an early vacation from work to spend more time bonding with the children. Slowly, the tension between the children and me improved, but I could still see they missed their mother and their once happy family life. Sure, I'll continue from where I left off. The holiday season came around very fast that year, at least it seemed that way to me. On Christmas Eve, Mark gave me a friendship ring, which he said was to be my pre-engagement ring. It was a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year for me. Spring came racing around as the bond between Mark and I grew stronger and stronger. I was fearful he would be sent back to his grandparents' ranch again once school let out for the summer. He told me he would fight that decision and find a summer job somewhere around town. It was the last month of the school year when the bomb dropped. Mark's father had finally convinced his superior officers he would be able to contribute more to the Army at an active duty station. He got his transfer orders to Stuttgart, Germany. Mark came to school the next day, and I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. My first thought was that his father was going to send him back to his grandparents for the summer. When Mark told me he and his family were moving to Germany by the end of June, my world literally exploded. I broke down in hysterics and had to be sent to the nurse's office. I was a total wreck for the remainder of the school year. My grades plummeted. If it had not been for my previous high grades, I would never have passed on to my senior year. All kinds of thoughts raced through my mind. I even told Mark we should run away and elope, but Mark was the cooler head. He knew we were way too young to make it on our own. The day finally came when Mark's family left for the airport and their new life in Germany. Our farewell was like someone tearing my heart out while it was still beating. I was totally devastated. It was a good thing we were out of school for the summer. My parents saw the depression I was in and managed to get me into counseling and therapy before school began in September. The therapy did help me, and I continued with it through all of my senior year. Mark and I wrote daily letters to each other. You have to remember, this was the time before the internet and email. Our letters were both loving and sorrowful. We missed each other, and I firmly believe the separation was increasing our love for each other. I did not date any other guys during my senior year. In fact, I did not even attend the senior prom at the end of the year. I was Mark's girl, and I would remain faithful to him no matter what. Instead of chasing and dating other boys in my senior class, I concentrated all of my efforts on improving my grade point average and making a high score on my SAT test. All of that effort paid off in the form of acceptance and a scholarship to Stanford University. My sister Jennifer was already a student at Stanford. She would be able to help me with the relocation and getting me started on campus. All of those wonderful things made me very happy. In his letters, Mark also praised my efforts and the results. Still, I didn't look forward to the summer with us still thousands of miles apart. In August, the second bomb went off, but it was not as immediate in its destructive force as the first bomb about the Roberts' move to Germany. This time the bomb came as an interruption to the stream of daily letters which Mark and I exchanged. There was an entire week where I didn't get any mail from Mark. I became very worried about Mark, and I even tried to contact him by phone. That didn't work out. The phone number had been changed. In the next letter I received from Mark, he told me his dad had been accidentally killed during a training exercise. His letter was very short, and he told me he was having difficulties with his mother. He did not elaborate. I continued sending my daily letters to Mark, trying to extend my sympathy for the loss of his father and trying to give him some encouragement during those very tough times. The last letter I received from Mark told me his mother was very sick and she had been sent to a hospital. He was now trying his best to care for his younger sister and to put the family things in order. He signed his letter professing his undying love for me and stating one day we would be together. I continued to write Mark every day, even though I was not receiving any response. September found me on the campus of Stanford University with my sister Jennifer. I was not sure I was emotionally ready to take on the challenges of university life. All I could think of was my true love in Germany facing some extremely hard tasks, and I was not there to help him. If it had not been for Jennifer helping me through those first months at the university, I'm sure I would have flunked out. It was during the Thanksgiving holidays the first of my letters was returned to me marked "Return to Sender," address unknown. That small notice on the envelope was like a dagger through my heart. I had not gotten a letter from Mark in over a month. Now it seemed he would not be receiving any of my letters. I was a lost soul. Nothing in my life seemed to matter to me anymore. I felt I could have died and not regretted leaving my empty world. Once again, it was Jennifer and her constant mothering which gave me the courage to move forward. I finally had to resume my therapy. This time, it was with a different therapist. Through her help and guidance, I pulled myself together and once again focused all of my energy on my studies and future career. Still, something deep inside was missing. It must have been part of my soul, because I felt spiritually numb and void. After a full year of not hearing anything back from Mark, I pushed his memory to the back of my mind and essentially laid him to rest. All of his previous letters were packed in several shoeboxes and stored in the back of my closet. As a side note, John, you never knew about those letters. I kept them stored away until the day you proposed marriage to me. Your love and that proposal began to heal my wounded soul. That weekend, I burned all of Mark's letters and scattered the ashes into San Francisco Bay. Mark was finally put to rest forever, or so I thought. I never told you about Mark, and I told all of my family never to mention him to you or to me ever again. What followed after college were 14 of the most wonderful years that a woman, a wife, and a mother could ever ask for in her entire lifetime. You must believe those words, John. They are the absolute truth. This next section of my explanation may sound strange and some of it absolutely absurd. There will be things in this letter that defy logic and rationality. Yet after all the dust of my words has settled, you will find one terribly torn and bedeviled woman, a woman who has had to come face to face with some very serious revelations in her life. As you know, one of my major responsibilities at CableNet is to review and approve all subcontractors who perform work or services for CableNet. The review process of my department focuses on the subcontractor's past and present compliance with all of the state and federal labor laws. We do not issue work contracts to subcontractors who employ illegal immigrants or who violate the work hour laws. Subcontractors are required to fill out a lengthy application form in order to qualify for a CableNet contract. These applications are screened by 2 of my assistants, and those applicants who pass the initial screening are then sent to my office for my review. It was March 22nd when a stack of applications was placed on my desk. There were 6 folders for my review, which I began right after lunch. The 3rd folder I opened was the application form from the MR Construction Company. I read the summary page that Loretta, my assistant, had done as part of her initial review. Her summary comments were very favorable for Mr. Construction, so I began to read the details on the application form. When I got to the section on ownership of the company, it was like I was just slammed into a brick wall at 60 miles per hour. Mark Roberts, sole owner of Mr. Construction Company. I don't know how long it took me to catch my breath after reading Mark's name on the application. My mind seemed to explode inside my head. Confusion reigned supreme inside my shell-shocked mind. Could this person be my Mark Roberts? Could this person be the Mark Roberts who had professed his undying love for me so many years ago? The rest of that day was a total waste for me. I told Loretta to do some more detailed background checking on Mr. Construction Company and the owner, Mark Roberts. I left work early that day and came home to try and get my mind under control again. I needed you and the children around me to reinforce the loving bond we share as a family. As hard as I tried, I could not entirely push the thought of Mark back into that dark, cold dungeon where his memory had been imprisoned for over 20 years. I remember we had a great family night with the 4 of us chatting and enjoying several games of Scrabble before the children went off to bed. I also remember that we did not make love that night, even though I was in the mood to have you take me intimately. The rest of the week for me was like working in a forced labor camp. I drove myself exceedingly hard to keep my focus on the daily assignments. Friday came and went with Loretta still doing her background check on Mr. Construction. Saturday and Sunday were totally hectic days for me on purpose. Every small project I had postponed up to that point I jumped on with gusto. You even remarked that I must have taken a double dose of my morning vitamins. It was a Herculean task inside my mind to suppress the thoughts of Mark from overwhelming my conscious mind. Monday morning, Loretta came in with another small stack of application folders. She told me the background check on Mr. Construction was on top. She left my office and closed the door behind her. I remember looking at the top folder as if it were a poisonous snake ready to strike. It took me several minutes of staring at the folder before I reached over and opened it. There, on the first page of the background check, was all the information I needed to confirm that this Mark Roberts was, in fact, my Mark Roberts. The report also indicated that he was single, divorced for 8 years, and living in Greenwood, about 25 miles from my office. My body went cold as the flood of suppressed memories slammed into my conscious mind like a tsunami wave. All of those feelings, which I thought were long forgotten and buried, rose up and shook me to my core. It was impossible for me to think any thoughts other than thoughts of Mark and the young love we shared so briefly 20 years ago. Once again I turned to Jennifer for her advice and counsel. She knew there was a serious problem when I came to her house early in the afternoon to talk to her. She was the only living relative who knew about Mark and the relationship we shared before his father was killed in Germany. She had always been my rock and steadfast advisor. Now I needed her advice more than ever. After telling Jennifer about my discovery, she had a very bewildering look on her face. It took her several minutes to compose her thoughts before she told me I must forget all about Mark and leave his memory to rest in peace. Although it wasn't necessary, she reminded me about the fabulous life we have as a family. She told me Mark was in the past and must remain in the past if I wished to keep our family whole. I knew she was right. I knew I had everything a woman could possibly want or expect in a loving family relationship. Still, there was the nagging voice of curiosity that wouldn't shut up inside my mind. The following week, my curiosity could no longer be contained. I had Loretta set up a meeting with Mr. Mark Roberts for the following afternoon. Mark had no way of knowing who I was other than I was the final person in the approval process. He was just asked to come to Mrs. Jessica Harris' office the next afternoon. Despite all my efforts to control myself, my emotions were a raging inferno. What would happen during that first meeting? Would Mark remember me? Would there be any feelings left between us? I didn't sleep very well that night. Driving to work that morning was like driving to a wake. The apprehension was almost overwhelming. My conscience was in full rebellion. Every nerve in my body was frazzled. At 2:30, there was a knock on my door, and Loretta stuck her head around the door to tell me Mr. Mark Roberts was here for his 2:30 appointment. Mark stepped into my office, and Loretta closed the door. There was a split second where Mark looked at me with a confused look on his face. Then he simply asked, "Jessica, is that you, Jessica?" I stood up from my desk on legs which seemed as if they were made of rubber. "Yes, Mark, it's me, Jessica." Neither one of us knew what to say next. It was silence for a very long second. Then I told him to take a seat in front of my desk. I could tell Mark was in a mild state of shock at seeing me for the first time in over 20 years. He wasn't sure what he should do or say. I asked him how he was and commented on the fact he was looking very fit and healthy. Still, he was having trouble coming to grips with the situation. I changed topics and then began to tell him about the approval process. He just sat there not saying a word as I told him his application had been approved and that he would be able to contact the director of installations to receive his contract assignments. How I managed to speak to him for over 15 minutes without breaking down like a quivering bowl of jello, I'll never know. I just smiled politely when I was done and asked if he had any questions about the contract or the work. He just slowly shook his head no, but his eyes never left my face. When I indicated the meeting was over, he was very slow to rise from the chair. As he got to his feet, he finally seemed to gain some control over his initial shock. He thanked me for approving his company and then said he would like to meet with me for lunch. I told him we could meet the next day at Brandon's restaurant across the street from my office. He looked pleased at my response, but was still unsure how to end the meeting, so he just smiled and said he would meet me at Brandon's the next day at noon. After Mark left my office, I slumped back into my chair. There was a tightness in my chest as I realized the first lover in my life had just been resurrected from the dead. Nothing happened the next day over lunch, except that Mark told me the awful details of what happened after his father was killed. His mother had always been a frail woman. The news of her husband's death caused a nervous breakdown. She had to be committed to a mental hospital. Mark was now forced to assume the role as the head of the family. There was his little sister he had to comfort and support. The army arranged for Mark and Sarah to be sent back to live with the grandparents. Their mother remained behind in the mental hospital as Mark and his little sister returned to Idaho. Before Mark and his sister had settled in at their grandparents', they were given the news that their mother had committed suicide in the hospital. In the brief period of less than a month, Mark and Sarah were orphans. Mark told me his grief and the burden placed upon him with the deaths of his parents was the major reason he stopped writing to me. He felt he would no longer be able to uphold the promises he made to me. There were other more serious demands placed on him. He wanted me to be happy and to move my life forward, so he stopped writing to me in hopes I would find another man to love. At no time during the lunch conversation did Mark make any statements that he wanted to become a part of my life again. He knew I was married and the mother of 2 children. I believe he was sincerely happy for me and for my life as your wife. The luncheon ended with a handshake as Mark walked to his car in the parking lot. I went back to my office and tried to get on with my daily work. Unfortunately for me, those early memories would not go away. As much as I tried to push them into the background, Jennifer continued to advise me not to see Mark again and for me to forget about him. I never told her any more about my meetings with Mark. I guess I was too ashamed to tell her of my adultery. John, I really did try to follow Jennifer's advice for over a week. I wrestled with my internal demons. The following week, I finally gave in and called Mark and asked if we could meet for lunch again. That next lunch was the beginning of my infidelity. There was no seduction or sex involved, but during our meal, I confessed to Mark the fact I had never stopped loving him. He confessed the same to me. At that moment, I knew I needed to have Mark as part of my life once again. It was me, John, not Mark, who started the wheels in motion for what would become several sexual trysts for us before you made your discovery. Somewhere in the following weeks, I became a different person. Somehow, I began to feel I was 2 different women living in the same body. When I was with you and the children, I was the same loving wife and mother I had always been. When I was with Mark, I was that young girl again, finding my lost love and once again having him in my arms. I knew it was wrong, no excuses, no defense for my actions. All I can truly say to you, John, is my love for you has never diminished. Contrary to many stories you may have read, there was never any competition between you and Mark in my mind. You are my husband, and he could never be my husband. Those were my thoughts during those days of confusion and turmoil for me. Never, and I mean never, did I ever consider leaving you for Mark. All I can hope for at this juncture in our lives is that you will reconsider your decision to proceed with the divorce. I do not want to be the ex-Mrs. John Harris. I want to remain your wife and to live together as we have since we were married. But as much as I would like to say to you that I will never see Mark again, I would only be lying to you. Mark is back in my life and I don't want to lose him again. This is not the way a marriage is supposed to work, my darling husband. But I cannot help myself for feeling the way I do now. It is my wish we can somehow come to an arrangement which would permit us to live together as the family we have always been and to share it with my dual life. If you can find it within your heart to meet with me, maybe I could better explain my feelings and answer any questions you may have of me. But my darling husband, I desperately want to remain your loving wife. I love you now and forever. Your loving wife, Jessica. I sat there with the letter in my hand. I now knew more about Mark and Jessica than I had before about their past relationship. It may have been a lost, unfulfilled teenage romance for Jessica and Mark, but I would not be any part of its fulfillment. Jessica's letter was a true confession, but it changed nothing in my mind. I knew now there could never be a full reconciliation between us. She once again told me she needed Mark to be part of her life. There was no way I could be a part of that arrangement. I put the letter back in the envelope and filed it away for some future date when I would let Michael and Emily read it and understand why their parents divorced. I went silent about reading the letter. Jennifer finally stopped me several days later and asked me if I had read the letter. I wasted time reading that letter, and in short, your sister wanted my permission to remain married to me and still open her legs to her lover. She is not sorry for breaking my heart and my family. She just wants me to roll over and accept her cheating, so it changes nothing. Whatever Jessica and I had for 14 years is now over. I do not care to meet with her or ever see her again. The divorce will be finalized next week. I turned and walked away from a very sad soon-to-be sister-in-law. The divorce decree was finalized without me being in attendance. I had my attorney attend the hearing. When the decree was made official, I was told Jessica was there and cried as the judge issued the pronouncement. I had my wish. I was never forced to come face-to-face with Jessica. Whenever necessary, I would inform her of my plans with the children through her sister. The instructions would simply be for her to remain away from us and not to try and interfere with them. In fact, she no longer existed in my world. I really wanted to catch hold of the a-hole who ruined my marriage, and I really wanted to punch him in the face and kick him in the balls. But I had kids to take care of, and I never wanted Jessica to try and take the kids away. So I decided to take my anger and channel it into creating a better life for my kids. 6 months after the divorce, Jessica and Mark married. Over the next 2 years, they had a baby boy. They remained living in Greenwood. Jessica's close relationship with Michael and Emily continued over the years. Emily was especially thrilled when her mother gave birth to her new stepbrother. I never met with Jessica or her family after the divorce. In my mind, she died the day I made my fateful discovery. I remained the stern and loving father who became totally involved with the children as they grew up. I refused to go on any dates with the numerous females who constantly tried to become involved with me. Jessica was the only woman I would ever love enough to want to be intimate with. In place of sex and female companionship, I focused my attention on the children, my job, and I even became involved in local politics. It was at their 18th birthday that my kids were given the letter that their mother had written to me. I told them that I held on to the letter till I thought they were old enough to understand why I divorced their mother. They understood and supported me. That did cause them to start distancing themselves from their mother and her family. I guess after all these years I will get some sort of satisfaction. Love may be a many-splendored thing, but love can also be a very destructive force when Cupid decides to play his practical jokes. So it was for Jessica and me. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of love and betrayal. What would you do if you found out your spouse was leading a double life? Let us know in the comments below. Lacey and I met in college during our junior year and were instantly drawn to each other. She had thick blonde hair, green eyes, a beautiful face, and a slender, flexible body with long legs and medium-sized breasts. In a word, she was perfect, at least for me. But the main thing that made me fall head over heels in love was her personality. She was smart, cheerful, and funny. I could talk to her for hours about everything and everyone. We were best friends, and after 3 months of being together, Lacey gave herself to me in the back seat of my old Ford parked behind the city baseball stadium. At that moment, it was the brightest moment of my life. Everything was clumsy and awkward when our bodies finally connected. She cried, but not from pain, as she assured me, but from happiness. I'll never forget her words when I finally took her for the first time. "Oh, Billy, we did it." From that moment on, I had no doubt Lacey and I would be together forever, or as it turned out, for 10 years. My name is Bill White, but everyone calls me Billy. I was born and raised in a small town in Ohio. I'm exactly 511 inches tall and weigh 187 pounds. I'm considered quite handsome with my blue eyes and brown hair. By profession, I'm a contractor. I have my own small company with a permanent staff of 5 people. We primarily do interior remodeling for people who can afford it, and our work is considered excellent. Lacey teaches music at a local high school, and together we make a very good living. We have a beautiful home, and since we are both in our early 30s, we are planning to have children in the very near future. As I mentioned, the first 10 years of our marriage were wonderful. Our life was amazing, although I'm not going to exaggerate and say we did it twice a day or even every day, more like 3 times a week, but it was always loving and often passionate. We hugged every night. It was an unbreakable rule. And every morning, waking up next to Lacey, I was amazed at how beautiful she was and how lucky I was to have her as my wife. I can honestly say that although I would prefer to live with her every day, if I had to give my life for her, I would do so without hesitation. I guess I'd better make that last statement in the past tense because suddenly something hit me, something so unexpected and emotionally overwhelming that I still haven't fully recovered from it. As a contractor in Ohio, most of our work occurs during the spring, summer, and fall months. People just don't like it when the interior of their homes is destroyed when it's 23 VDGF outside and there's a foot of snow on the ground. For this reason, the vacations that Lacey and I took usually fell during the Christmas, New Year's, and spring break holidays. During the summer, when I was busy making money, Lacey would sometimes take a week off to visit her parents, go on a shopping trip with her two sisters, or take a summer lesson or two to keep her teaching skills up to date. Every winter, our favorite trip was somewhere warm. So in the winter of our collapse, we chose an all-inclusive spa hotel in Jamaica for 2 weeks in paradise for the two of us to reconnect in body and spirit. However, I soon realized how wrong this thought was. First, I must explain that before Lacey and I boarded the plane in Cincinnati, I not only had no idea, but I would have called anyone a liar and spat in their face if they dared to imply that there was anything wrong with our marriage. That's not true. We were the perfect couple, so madly in love with each other and deeply connected in every way that it was as if we were one person fused from two bodies. Our union was so strong that nothing on earth or in heaven could come between us. I guess I just forgot that there was also a hell, and although I didn't know it at the time, I was teetering on the edge, ready to fall into the molten abyss. My first inkling that something was wrong came when we checked in at Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport. The line was long, with many trying to trade the extreme cold for tropical warmth. As Lacey and I stood in line to go through the scanners, I noticed a man in the line next to us staring at Lacey. This was nothing unusual. My wife is a stunning woman, and men often give her slightly lustful looks, but here it looked different, as if he was trying to get her attention. I wanted to know more, so I pretended to look at my boarding pass while watching the guy out of the corner of my eye. His glances in her direction were, to put it mildly, furtive. But then I caught Lacey's quick glance at him and a slight wave of her hand as if she were saying, "Not now." He smiled and nodded, and I almost threw up my breakfast. I was stunned. It was at that moment that I realized these two knew each other. How well, I didn't know, but this realization raised all sorts of warning flags. While we were passing through security, I carefully watched both of them, but there were no further attempts to establish contact from either side. I know I became very quiet, but for some reason Lacey didn't seem to notice. I guessed her mind was somewhere else. I hoped that this man, whoever he was, would not be on our plane, but as soon as we sat down and took our seats, I realized I was mistaken. He was sitting in the aisle about 15 rows in front of us. Another thing that struck me as odd was that Lacey decided to take an aisle seat in our row. This had never happened before. She always wanted to sit by the window, but not this time. I asked her what was wrong since I had pre-registered her for a window seat, giving myself the middle seat. But she just said that her breakfast didn't agree with her, and she didn't want to bother anyone if she had to use the restroom. I asked the woman sitting on the aisle if she would mind switching to a window seat, and when I told her about my wife's stomach problems, she readily agreed, and the exchange was made. I don't usually have trouble sleeping on planes, and the long flight between Cincinnati and Miami provided me with that opportunity. But in my state of heightened anxiety on this flight, I couldn't fall asleep even though I tried to pretend. We put our things in the overhead locker, and Lacey put her purse under the seat in front of her. Once we were airborne, I took out my Reds baseball cap, pulled it over my forehead, and pretended to fall asleep. I left myself enough room to follow Lacey, and after 15 minutes, she looked down at me. As soon as she was sure that I was asleep, she got up and walked down the aisle to the toilets. I moved in my seat so that I could see the entire aisle and noticed that as she passed by a place occupied, as I now assumed, by her acquaintance, she extended her hand as if to steady herself and briefly touched the guy's shoulder. More proof that there was something between them, and it wasn't just a coincidence. I noticed they weren't looking at each other, and Lacey headed further into the restroom. When she came out a few moments later, she looked straight at him and he stood up and walked towards her. When they met in the passage, instead of one of them moving to the side to allow the other to pass, they looked at each other and stopped for a moment. He put his hand on her waist, she touched his chest for a second, and they spoke to each other. They both smiled warmly, and as she headed back to her aisle seat, his hand slid down her butt, making Lacey smile again. That was all I needed to understand that these two had known each other for a while and were obviously close on some level. At the same time, it hit me like a ton of bricks that my wonderful marriage was in real danger and could very well end. I suddenly felt so sad that I had to turn away from Lacey as she sat down and fastened her seatbelt. How could she do this to me, to us? How long had this lasted? Who was this man? And how far had they come in their relationship? I spent the rest of the flight trying to make some sense of everything I saw and praying that when we boarded our flight to Montego Bay, he wouldn't be there. But somehow, I already knew he would be. To my chagrin, I was right. As soon as Lacey and I boarded the plane, I saw him sitting 5 rows behind us. He was reading a magazine and did not pay any attention to us when we took our seats. Lacey, who was apparently no longer suffering from stomach problems, took her usual seat by the window. The flight to Montego Bay was uneventful, and upon landing, we collected our luggage, rented a car, and headed to the hotel. While I was driving, Lacey was typing something on her phone. "Who are you writing to?" "Oh, just my mother and sister. I told them that we had arrived." "Yes, maybe so," I thought, "but I would really like to see for myself." Isn't it strange that when suspicions begin, they are like a snowball? Our room was beautiful, with a balcony overlooking the ocean and one of the pools. As we unpacked, I realized I had to make a statement to get my wife back, so I walked over to Lacey, hugged her, and kissed her neck. "Do you know how much I love you?" Lacey turned to face me and lightly pecked my lips. "I love you too, baby," she said. A strange light appeared in her eyes, as if she were not next to me. Goosebumps ran across my skin. "You know that I would never do anything bad to you, right, Lacey?" She shuddered slightly. "I know that, Billy, and I know that you would never harm me or our wonderful marriage," I told her. And she shuddered again, and I saw tears appear in her eyes. "Of course, Billy, you know I won't do that." But she couldn't look at me while she was talking. She just looked at the floor. And then I realized that most likely I had lost the battle. If she hadn't done it before, now I knew she would soon give herself to another man. I let her go and quickly walked to the bathroom, hoping I wouldn't lose her before I got there. I sat in the bathroom for a few minutes, coming to my senses and asking myself the same questions over and over again. How did it happen? What did I do to push her into the arms of another man? Why didn't I notice anything weeks or months ago? But most importantly, what can I do to stop her from completely destroying us? Or is it too late? I washed my face and left the bathroom. Lacey stood there with a strange expression on her face. "Oh my God, Billy, I just got my period and I didn't bring any tampons with me." "What?" I asked. "You just got your period, Lacey, but you only experienced it a week ago. How could it start again?" "I don't know, but sometimes this happens. Maybe it was the excitement of the holiday. I need to go to the store and buy tampons." And she left, closing the door behind her. My first thought was that maybe this was a good thing. This would slow down the romance between her and her boyfriend, whoever he is. My second thought was, wait a minute, this just can't be true. In all the years that we lived together, this had never happened to her. She was on pills and her periods were always regular, like clockwork. Then why would she make all this up? Unless she decided that her period would prevent me from insisting on that she could devote all her love and passion to her new man. This is how it should be. And if so, then she is not the woman I married. No one can be so treacherous and cruel. She must really hate me if she allows herself to let me plan and pay for this trip so she can cut me out of her life and give everything she has to a man I've never even met. I felt completely lost, like I was losing my mind. Who was this woman whom I loved with all my heart for over 10 years? Looking around the room, I saw that she had left her cell phone next to the TV. I turned it on, not knowing if she had changed the password, and found that there was no other mistake on her part. I went to her messages and read the most recent ones from someone named Mark Eisner. I pinpointed my finger at the beginning of the correspondence that began when we were still driving in the car to the hotel. Mark: "Hey, babe. Oh my God, you look amazing. I can't wait to have you as mine." Lacey: "You brat. You're the reason Billy almost caught us at the airport." Mark: "I couldn't help it, Lacey. I look at you and feel how soon you'll be in bed with me. I almost kissed you right on the plane when we were standing in the aisle." Lacey: "Billy was fast asleep, so he wouldn't have noticed. But it might have looked bad to others. I really like the way you gave my butt a little squeeze. A little preview of things to come, LOL. It's time to go. We're almost there." The conversation between them resumed once we were in our hotel room. Mark: "I'm in the lobby. Are you there yet?" Lacey: "In my room. Billy is in the bathroom. He's acting strange." Mark: "What's the difference? When are you going to give up on Billy Boy so I can have you all to myself?" Lacey: "I told you from the very first time we were together that I couldn't and wouldn't do this, Mark. Billy is a wonderful husband. He loves me, cares for me, and gives me a standard of living that you could never offer." Mark: "But I'm better than him in bed." Lacey: "Oh God, yeah. No one can do it like you, baby. You know, but no matter how good you are, believe me, you are the best. But I need more than just sex, and that's what Billy gives me. Billy and I are getting ready to have kids, so the next 2 weeks are just for you, baby. I told Billy I stopped taking the pill when we got home, but I actually stopped taking it almost 3 weeks ago. So now you have a chance to give me your child. If you can make me a baby in the next 2 weeks, we'll have it and Billy will raise it, thinking it's his." Mark: "You're so obscene, Lacey, but I love it. I'll make a baby in your sweet belly." Lacey: "God, you're making me wet. I can't wait to feel you inside me." Mark: "What about Billy Boy? How do you know he won't catch us in the next 2 weeks? Lacey: "Because he won't have sex with me, stupid boy. I will tell him that my period has started again, and oddly enough it will continue the entire time that we are on vacation, LOL. Mark: "Are you sure he'll buy it?" Lacey: "Of course. He loves me and knows that I would never lie to him. Besides, when we return home, I will compensate him for everything." Mark: "Damn, he's so stupid. He's such a loser." Lacey: "Stop calling him that or you'll lose me forever." Mark: "We both know you won't let that happen. You need my sex too much." Lacey: "That's true, but I still don't like it when you say things like that about Billy. He is a good guy." Mark: "Okay, meet me in the lobby." Lacey: "Give me 5 minutes." I stood in complete shock and started to put her phone back, but stopped. There is a possibility that I can find a way to use these text messages as evidence in a divorce. I wanted to replace her phone with mine, and then I thought, the hell with it. My phone contains all my personal information. She started this mess. Let her try to find a way out herself. So I kept both of our phones. I figured it wouldn't take long for her to realize her phone was missing, but by then I'd be long gone. I felt bile rising in my throat, causing me to vomit. I walked to the window and looked out at the beautiful Caribbean Sea. 8 hours ago, I was the happiest man on earth, preparing for 2 weeks of romance in the tropical sun with the love of my life, my wife, my soulmate, and now my world had collapsed. I have never felt so alone, shocked, and angry in my life. I wanted to hurt them both, destroy them for making a pathetic fool out of me. Luckily, the rational side of my brain gradually took over. Divorce was inevitable. There was no way I was going to end up with the cheating woman who was previously my loving wife. But I wanted more. I wanted revenge. Looking out the window, I accidentally looked down at the pool, and there they stood, hugging tightly, immersed in a passionate kiss. Mark lowered his hands to caress Lacey's backside. I almost threw up, but instead, I took a deep breath and grabbed my video camera, which I had bought specifically for this trip, but now used to record their actions. While Lacey was unpacking, She probably didn't even bother to look out the window of our room. Otherwise, she would have noticed that the pool was in sight. The camera had a decent zoom, so I was able to get some nice close-ups of them tongue-kissing. It made me sick to watch, but I used it against them later. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast, but my stomach was in cramps and my brain was blocked. Then it occurred to me, how is she going to spend time with her lover if I'm around? They must have a plan to keep me busy while they have fun together. As I thought about it, it occurred to me that it was actually simple. Lacey was going to spend 2 weeks with her lover Mark so he could have a baby, and I wanted revenge, so why not beat them to it? Instead of waiting and only then trying to destroy their plans, first I had to figure out how they planned to keep me busy while they had sex until they passed out. I was still filming the video when I saw them kiss one more time, and then Lacey quickly turned and walked away. She could return to our room at any minute, and I needed to get my emotions under control. So I went back to the bathroom and turned on the shower to try to relax. If she asks what's wrong, I'll just tell her that it helps me relax after a flight and that I wanted to get rid of that airplane smell. 5 minutes later, I heard the door to our room open and close. "I'm back," she shouted. "I brought water and tampons." "Great, I'll be out in a minute." Why did she bring us water? Bottled water is provided in all rooms at the resort, and then it suddenly dawned on me. She plans to drug me with something. Now my mind was feverishly figuring out how to deal with this. If I don't drink the water she bought me, she'll know I'm suspicious. If I drink it and it's poisoned, I will pass out, and she and her lover will go to his room. What should I do? I turned off the shower and dried myself slowly, wondering how to deal with this. Then Lacey knocked on the door. "Are you okay? You've been in there for quite a long time." Her voice was filled with worry. I couldn't help but wonder if she was worried about me or about being late for her big date. My anger began to rise again, but I tried my best to maintain my composure. When I opened the door and saw her standing by the bed drinking from a bottle of water, she handed me another bottle, and I noticed that it was already open. "With this climate change, we need to stay hydrated," she said. She looked me in the eye and quickly turned away. I took the bottle and pretended to take a long swig. As I turned and walked back to the bathroom quickly but quietly, I spat the water into the sink and emptied the bottle, grabbing one of the bottles of water from the bathroom counter. I refilled the empty bottle Lacey had given me. Returning to the room, I saw that she was busy unpacking and hanging clothes in the closet, so I was pretty sure that she did not see me spit out the water or refill the bottle. After leaving the bathroom, I continued to drink water. I started looking around the room and noticed that she had laid out a red dress. "Is this what you're going to wear to dinner? It seems like a waste of time if we can't have sex." "You know how much this dress excites me," I said. As I said this, I realized that she was dressing for him, not for me. "Well, since I brought it with me, I can put it on," she smiled. "Are you tired from all this traveling? You must be tired." Bingo, I thought. She actually poisoned my water. But how should I play this game? I needed more proof of their affair, so I pretended to be sleepy. I took another sip of water, then let my eyelids droop a little as if I was tired. In fact, I felt like I had just drunk several cans of Red Bull. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, and it took all my self-control to pretend to be sleepy. "Now that you mention it, yeah, I'm a little tired. What time should we be ready for dinner?" I asked slightly lazily. "Seating won't begin for a couple of hours. Why don't you lie down and get some rest? I'll wake you up when it's time to get ready," she said. This with such sincerity that I almost believed it. I yawned. "Okay, honey, it won't hurt me to rest. Just don't let me sleep for long. I want to spend as much time with you as possible. I love you so much." I saw her flinch as if I had touched a nerve. "I love you too," she said with less conviction. I lay down on the bed and began to move very slowly as if I was falling asleep. Soon I was snoring softly and heard Lacey take out her phone to make a call. "Hey, it worked. He passed out. How long will this keep him asleep? So we have the whole night ahead of us. I can't wait until we have passionate sex," she giggled, and I almost choked but was able to maintain the illusion that I was dreaming. "Meet me in an hour at the Sandpiper bar. I want to freshen up a little," she giggled again. "You're so bad. I can't wait. Love, bye." She hung up and started getting ready for her big night. I watched her through barely open eyes as she picked out her panties, a thong, of course, and a push-up bra. What a slut. Once again, my anger grew within me while I tried my best to act unconscious. She continued to get ready, then went to the bathroom and turned on the shower. I knew she would be there for a good 10 minutes, and as soon as I heard the shower door close, I quickly stood up and headed straight for her purse. I started looking for sleeping pills or whatever she put in the water bottle she gave me. I came across a bottle of pills that had no label on it. I opened it and found about a dozen small whitish capsules. This must be what she put in my water, so I carefully shook out about half a dozen pills and put the bottle back in her purse. I then grabbed a paper napkin, wrapped up the pills, and put them in the pocket of the shorts I was wearing. I quickly returned to the bed just as I heard her turn off the water in the shower. I made myself comfortable and continued my fake sleep while she finished getting ready for the date. It took her another 45 minutes to get ready, but as soon as she was out the door, I got up and got dressed as quickly as I could. While I was lying there, I had time to develop a plan. First, there needed to be more video evidence that they were together. Second, ruin their plans for the rest of the trip. I didn't know how to do it, but I knew that eventually both would end up in a world of pain. Third, go home a few days earlier than our trip was supposed to end and start the divorce proceedings. I wanted to attack Lacey before she could do anything to stop or slow me down, like emptying our bank accounts and canceling all our credit cards. No, I will do this, not her. After getting dressed, I grabbed the video camera I had used that day and ran out the door. This camera could perform well in low light, or so the advertisement said. I was going to find out. As I walked to the bar, the hotel wasn't that big and only had 2 bars, both ocean view, but the Sandpiper was larger and had a dance floor. I managed to find a strategically advantageous spot behind some low palm trees that gave me a full view of the bar, but at the same time far enough away that I could not be seen. The zoom lens on the camera gave me a very good picture. It wasn't too crowded, making it easy to spot my prey. She was wearing that damn red dress that I love so much. It made me burn with anger and hatred. He wrapped his arms around her, and it took all my self-control and willpower not to run up to them and beat him to death. No, I had to remind myself that I was here to get evidence, not to end up in jail. I started recording how they behaved in the Caribbean like 2 lovers. They laughed, touched each other, and kissed like lovers like Lacey and I earlier. After about an hour, the DJ started playing some music and they started dancing. After watching them on the dance floor for another hour, I couldn't take it anymore and was about to go back to my room alone. Then I noticed that they were leaving the dance floor quite quickly. I carefully followed them, trying to keep my distance so as not to be noticed. As I followed them, they stopped from time to kiss and caress each other, and I recorded their actions. They soon reached his room, located at the back of the hotel. It was smaller than ours and was located on the 1st floor, from where there was no view of the ocean. This guy must be on a budget, I thought. They entered his room, and I quickly moved closer to see if I could look inside. Luckily, the curtains weren't completely closed, and the window was slightly open, so I could hear their conversation and was able to record everything that was said. This guy probably likes to see who he's having sex with because he left the light on. They started kissing and undressing each other while I videotaped every moment of their connection. Once they were both completely naked, I noticed that this guy was well endowed, but that was no reason for her to cheat on me or let this asshole impregnate her and force me to raise a little bastard as my own child. I continued to stay awake outside his room and recorded their lovemaking for what seemed like an eternity. This guy was not only well endowed, but also seemed to have considerable stamina. It was getting close to midnight, and I thought she would soon leave him to be with me. But then I heard their conversation. "Are you sure these pills are safe? I don't want them to die from an overdose or a seizure," she said with some concern in her voice. How touching. "Hey, don't worry about it, baby. He'll sleep for at least another 6 hours. He may wake up with a slight headache, but nothing more. You only used one tablet, right? Yes, only one. And what would two do? I don't want to overdose him. They laughed. No, no, don't worry. If you give him two, he'll be unconscious for 12 hours or more. No, just keep giving him one before bed, and we can spend every night together. I want you to be pregnant by the time we leave here. Here's an additional key card for my room. If you can get away from him during the day, call me and we can meet here. Then they both laughed, and it filled me with such rage that I vomited. I had heard and seen enough for one evening, so I quietly left and returned to my room. Now I had to figure out how to destroy them both and make them feel the pain they caused me. It was clear that she would try to spend every night with him, so the first thing I was going to do was change those plans. Returning to my room, I reviewed what I had written down. As hard as it was, I began to formulate a plan that I hoped would completely ruin their fun. First, I had to find a way to separate them so that I could follow Mark and do what I intended. My idea was to leave him alone, maybe even drug him like Lacey did to me, and then beat the crap out of him while he was unconscious. He wouldn't be able to identify the attacker, and then I could leave completely free. Now the question was, how can I make sure that these two were not together? Then it occurred to me that I could treat Lacey to a spa day. The hotel had a spa that offered massages, facials, and even cosmetics. It was easy enough to buy a package and then give it to her as a surprise to show her how much I loved her. If she tries to refuse, I will say that it is non-refundable, thereby placing a huge amount of guilt on her to force her to still go like she did to me in the past. There is no way she can refuse my gift, and it will keep her busy for at least a couple of hours. It will be enough for me to give my lover the spanking he so generously deserves. I changed back into shorts and went to bed. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning when Lacey finally returned to the room. She quietly changed her clothes, climbed into bed, and snuggled up to me. I wanted to push her away, but I remained motionless, as if I was sleeping, and waited for the right moment to wake up. Shortly after 7 o'clock in the morning, I began to stir and pretended to slowly wake up. Lacey was fast asleep, so I got up and took a quick shower, then went out to find the spa. I was hoping they would open early so I could buy her a package that would keep her busy long enough for me to take care of some business. I also wanted to check and see if I could get home the next day, late in the morning, or early in the afternoon. It took me very little time to find the spa, and I saw that it was open, so I went to see what they offered as packages. There was a nice young woman behind the counter who helped me choose a package. I was more interested in how long the therapy would take rather than what it was intended to do. Having chosen one that took about 3 hours, I asked what time it could be booked for. The woman checked her computer and said that the first available slot she had was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I thought for a while, then decided to buy it and surprise my wife. That done, I headed out to explore the area, deciding that Lacey needed some sleep, as her time with her lover the previous night had probably left her tired. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, I returned to the room and found her still fast asleep, so I rummaged through her purse and found her phone. I checked her text messages and read one from him that he sent in the last hour. Mark, you were great last night. Any chance you could escape Billy for some afternoon fun? My anger returned, but I held it in. I was doing well, but now I knew the end was near. Lacey started to stir, so I put her phone back, walked over, and gently kissed her forehead. Good morning, sleepyhead. I'm sorry about yesterday for falling asleep so suddenly and ruining our dinner plans, but I have a surprise for you. She smiled and yawned. What kind of surprise? I booked you a spa day as an apology for last night and to show you how much I love you. Even in my half-asleep state, I noticed how she shuddered slightly and uncertainty appeared in her eyes. At that moment, I realized that she doubted whether she really loved me. I looked into her eyes. Everything is fine, or don't you like my gift? Oh, no, I like it. I just wish you had asked me first, she smiled faintly. If I had done that, it wouldn't have come as much of a surprise to you. Look, this doesn't mean you need to run to the spa right now. I've made a reservation for 2 o'clock today so we can spend some time together. Fine, she nodded. Thank you, you are very caring. Well, why don't you clean yourself up and we'll go have breakfast? I got out of bed. When she sat up, "Okay," she said, also getting up, grabbing her purse and going to the bathroom. I already knew what she was up to, but I didn't want to make her suspicious, so I went to the window and saw an interesting sight. Mark was standing by the pool, chatting with two young women and looking at his phone. Then I saw him typing, and suddenly he put the phone away. She must have told him about my unexpected gift, but he didn't seem too upset. His attention soon returned to the two women, who seemed to be laughing happily at something one of them had said. Then he waved his hand, and all three disappeared from my sight. Although it occurred to me that maybe Mark was making other plans in case Lacey couldn't provide a little afternoon entertainment, this could be very helpful. About an hour later, Lacey and I were standing at the buffet filling plates. Well, I was the one who filled mine, and she only took fruit and coffee. "Are you hungry, baby? Is it because of your period?" I asked. "Yes, that must be so. I really don't feel like eating." She got distracted. I couldn't help but wonder what Mark wrote in his message because it seemed to bother her. Well, it didn't really matter since my plan seemed to be having the desired effect on them, or at least on her. After breakfast, we decided to walk along the beach and look at the ocean. I took my camera with me and photographed the beach, palm trees, and Lacey. She smiled politely, and I said how beautiful she was and what a wonderful mother she would be. Then she shuddered, and an expression of uncertainty and guilt appeared on her face. "What happened, baby? Are you okay?" I knew that a feeling of guilt was beginning to gnaw at her. "No, I'm fine, just a little tired. Would you mind if I went back to my room to take a nap before my spa visit?" "Sure, no problem. I know it's not much fun to be on vacation and suddenly get your period. Go lie down and we'll see you in your room after your spa treatment. I'm sure it will do you good." She turned and walked back to the hotel without even kissing me goodbye. Well, soon I'll give her a kick in the ass. Now all I had to do was find Mark and make him pay. Continuing to walk along the beach, lost in my thoughts, I saw two couples walking towards me. The women I recognized were the two who had spoken to him this morning. Now they were with two very large guys who looked like they could be the Bengals quarterback. As I got closer, I began to hear their conversation. "Come on, baby, don't be like that. You know that Dave and I wanted to go deep-sea fishing and they had 2 spots available. We'll be back before dinner," one of the guys said. "Yeah, it's always like that. You guys go off and do whatever you want while we're hanging out here at the hotel," one of the women complained. "Baby, there's a lot you could do here. Go to town for shopping, relax by the pool or on the beach. Heck, you could even use the gym they have here," the other guy suggested. "Are you saying that I'm fat? Is that what you mean?" the woman snapped. "No, baby, not what I meant. It's just that you could do a lot of things here, that's all." He tried to backpedal. As they passed me on their way back to the hotel, I had already realized that he had lost the battle, but still continued to beg for his desire, but to no avail. After wandering around the beach for a while, I decided to go back and see if I could find out how her lover was doing. I was afraid Lacey missed her spa visit and would be with him, but if that was the case, maybe I could get some more videos of the two of them together. I wandered around the hotel for over an hour and then ended up in front of Mark's room. I heard voices coming from inside, but not Lacey's voice. I carefully prepared my camera and walked closer to the window. It was very risky because it was daytime and more people could pass by and see me. I decided that the best thing to do would be to mount the camera on an outside windowsill pointing into the room and just let it record on its own. Once the camera was set up, I walked down the path and found a spot where I could watch his door and see who was coming out. Time seemed to drag on forever, but my patience was rewarded. The two women I saw with Mark this morning at the pool, and then again at the beach with those two guys, came out of his room. They were all smiling and giggling as if they had some secret in common, and it was hilarious. As soon as they left, I went and grabbed my camera and headed back to my room. Lacey wouldn't be back from her spa treatment for almost another hour, so I had time to review what I'd written down. Returning to my room, I pulled out my laptop and downloaded all the videos I had recorded since our arrival onto it. It was mostly Lacey and the idiot, but then I watched what I just recorded when those two girls were in his room. It looks like they found something to do while their friends were deep-sea fishing. Mark talked them into having a threesome with him. It was like watching some second-rate adult movie. He had sex with one while the other watched and played with herself, and then the girls switched places and so on in a circle. At that moment, another idea struck me. What if I could time it right to return home while Lacey would be here trying to figure out what the hell happened? I knew that tonight she would probably try to drug me again so that I would repeat the performance and let her think I was knocked out. Then, if I'm lucky, she'll also meet Mark at the bar, dance and drink before returning to his room. If I managed to slip one pill into their drinks towards the end of the night at the bar, they'd be passed out by the time they got to his room. The timing has to be perfect, but in life, rarely does anything that is planned go perfectly. The second part of this plan was to make a DVR copy of Mark's latest conquests. I have to say that I was a little jealous of this guy who managed to convince two very attractive women to have a good time in his room. I had several DVR discs and made 2 copies of his day's exploits. So now I just had to figure out which rooms to leave them in. I also made a copy of everything I had recorded up to this point on another DVR so I could have some insurance. I went down to the front desk and was able to send the disc to my brother Frank's home with a note asking him not to play the disc or let anyone know that I had sent it to him. This was in case my plan failed, or Lacey and Mark also found out what I was up to and wanted to hurt me. If they kill me, then at least the disc that I sent to my brother will show the authorities who is behind it. After checking the time, I saw that Lacey was about to finish her treatment at the spa, so I decided to take a quick walk around the hotel to see what rooms the two women and their boyfriends were staying in. I'm sure their boyfriends would be more than a little interested in what their girlfriends were up to while they were deep-sea fishing. Soon I saw the two women I was looking for rise from the pool with towels in their hands. When I followed them, I learned that they were returning to their rooms, and of course, I watched them enter different rooms next to each other. This solved one part of my plan. Now, if everything goes as planned, and Lacey and Mark follow the same pattern as last night, by tomorrow morning, I could completely ruin the rest of the trip. I went back to my room to call the airline to find out when the earliest flight was the next morning. The best they had was a 10 a.m. flight, which was later than I had hoped, but I booked it anyway. Then I returned to the front desk to advise that my wife and I would have to leave the next morning due to an emergency at home and that we would be checking out of the hotel at 8 in the morning. They sympathized with me and wished me all the best, and I thanked them and headed back to the room. Now I was fully committed to my plan, come hell or high water. If things don't go as I hoped, I'll hop on a plane in the morning and get home before Lacey. At least I can ruin everything for her before she gets home. But if by some miracle everything goes according to my plan, she'll be stuck here for days, maybe even weeks before she gets home, which will give me time to really ruin her life. The plan was quite simple. First, let Lacey think she drugged me, and I'll pretend to fall asleep so she and Mark can spend the evening together. Second, I'll go back to the bar, watching and waiting for the right moment to spike their drinks with whatever Lacey tried to use on me. If I timed it right, they would pass out right before they got to his room or as soon as they got there. Again, the timing had to be perfect. Third, once they're in the room, I'll go and take Lacey back to our room and then come back and give Mark a good cleaning. I'll take his wallet, his cash, his passport, his credit cards, his clothes, everything he brought with him. Next, I'll find the rooms of the two women Mark had a threesome with previously and slide the DVR drives under their doors in the hopes that one of the boyfriends will see them first and watch them. I'm sure they won't be too happy to see what their girlfriends did while they were away. Mark's license plate is clearly captured on video, so I'm sure they won't have any problems finding him. Fifth, I will do to Lacey the same thing I did to Mark. I'll take everything she brought with her on the road and leave her nothing except the clothes she was wearing, her purse, and her empty wallet. I'll leave a little note in her empty wallet so she knows who's to blame. So now everything was ready, and all I could do from now on was wait for the players to make their moves. Lacey returned to the room at 5:30 in the evening looking more relaxed and radiant than ever before. It hurt me to think about how she ended her marriage and how I would never be with this beautiful woman again. "Billy, thank you very much for the spa day. Everything was amazing. I feel like a completely new woman." She actually glowed. "I'm so glad you liked it. When I first told you about it, you didn't seem all that excited, but now I'm glad you liked it. I just wanted to show you how much I love you." I saw her wince again, but I also saw her eyes filled with tears. "Thanks again. I liked it, and I love you." This time she said it with much more conviction and feeling. "Anytime, baby. We have dinner booked for 7 in the evening. How about we get some rest and then get ready for dinner?" She nodded and went to the bathroom, taking her purse with her. A few minutes later, she came out with 2 bottles of water and handed one to me. "Here, drink this. I want to go dancing tonight, so you better start hydrating now." She winked at me. Okay. Just let me go to the bathroom first," I chuckled. Once inside, I went through the same procedure as before, emptying the bottle, then refilling it with water from one of the ones on the counter. I flushed the toilet to make it sound like I was busy and went back to the bedroom. I continued to drink water, and after 15 minutes I began to do my sleepy act. Soon I was snoring, pretending to be asleep, and watching Lacey get ready for her last date with Mark, although she didn't know it yet. She went to the bathroom and turned on the shower. I quickly got out of bed and grabbed her phone to see what her lover was texting her, Lacey. "I can't leave this afternoon. Billy bought me a spa package. I couldn't say no." Mark: "No problem, baby. I have other plans right now. Are we still on for tonight?" Lacey: "Oh yeah, I can't wait to be in your arms and have you screaming my name." After reading this crap, my rage was no longer as strong because I knew the end was near. Now all I had to do was follow them to a bar, watch them dance for a few hours, and then spike their drinks easily. Well, maybe not so much. I rummaged through her purse and found Mark's room key card, put it in my pocket, and put everything back in its place. Lacey took a little more time to prepare herself, and then she did something completely unexpected. She sat down on the bed next to me and gently touched my cheek. "Billy, after this week I'll be all yours, I swear. I just needed to get this out of my head before we had kids. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, and I know you wouldn't understand, but I have to do it. The next few days are for me. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, but I know that if you find out, you'll leave me, and I need you now more than you know. I love you so much, but I really need to do this," she whispered. At first I thought that she might have realized that I was awake, but then I realized that she was trying to relieve her own guilt. But it was too late for that. Soon she was fully dressed and walked out the door. As soon as the door closed, I jumped out of bed, got dressed, and wasn't too far behind her. They again found themselves in the same bar as yesterday. There were more people there than last night, and I even saw 2 women and their boyfriends from the beach. If my plan works, they won't be together by the next morning. I found myself in the same place I had been the previous evening, so I made myself as comfortable as possible and, using my trusty camera, began recording the events of the evening. The evening went as I expected, and soon both were sitting at the table, talking and laughing. It was already late, and I realized that the time was approaching when I would need to drug them with sleeping pills. I quickly walked towards the bar, making sure none of them could see me. Once there, I found an empty seat next to where the waitresses placed drink orders. Once seated, I ordered a beer, keeping my eyes on them to make sure they didn't notice me. As I watched them, I noticed a waitress stop at their table to take their order. After receiving it, she immediately returned to the bar and told the bartender what she wanted. I was lucky that this was her only order. I listened to what she said to the bartender, and then when he walked away to fill the order, I called another bartender over and ordered the exact same drinks. The first bartender placed the drinks on the waitress's tray. She was distracted while talking to another waitress. My drinks were brought. I paid for them, then I took one drink and, blocking it from prying eyes, opened one of the capsules and plopped it into the drink, stirring the powder so that it dissolved better. It sizzled slightly but mixed perfectly with the drink. I did the same with the other one and was ready to trade. With a glass in each hand, I began to push past the waitress, keeping myself between her and the bar so I could make the exchange. I was quick, and fortunately the bar was crowded enough that no one noticed my actions. I moved away from the waitress and turned around, giving her the opportunity to take the drinks to the happy couple. I just as quickly walked away from the bar and returned to my place in the distance to watch and wait. The waitress brought them their drinks and I watched, hoping I had timed it right. It was just after 1 o'clock in the morning, so if the medicine worked as I hoped, they would be unconscious until 11 o'clock in the morning or so. It would be great if they got to Mark's room before they passed out. They sat sipping their drinks, and I was starting to get nervous. What if they don't finish their drinks? Will they have enough to create the desired effect? Then Mark leaned over and said something to Lacey. She smiled, and they both quickly drank what was left and left the bar. God bless. I moved quickly to keep up with them as they seemed to be in a hurry to get back to the room. This time, as I followed, I noticed that Lacey began to stumble and seemed to be having trouble maintaining her balance. Mark took her hand, threw it over his neck, and supported her with his arm around her waist. By the time they reached his room, Mark too began to sway slightly. My timing of their drinks was perfect, so now all I had to do was wait for the full effect. By the time they reached his door, she could barely stand, and he was stumbling more and more as he walked. He fumbled for the keycard and after several unsuccessful attempts was able to open the door and stagger inside. The door closed, so I waited a few minutes, then pulled out the keycard I took from Lacey's purse and opened the door. As I entered the room, I heard Mark begin, "What's wrong with you, baby?" "You didn't drink that much." He slurred his words, so I knew that he would be knocked out very soon. Upon entering the room, I saw Lacey lying face down on the bed, hibernating. Mark shook her, trying to wake her. "Come on, baby, it's time to make a baby." He looked back and saw me coming in. "Hey, who the hell are you?" He started to straighten up and almost fell. "Just her husband, the idiot. Now be a good boy and pass out so I can get her out of here." As if on cue, he slowly collapsed to the floor and didn't move anymore. Moving closer to the bed, I found his phone lying on the floor next to him. When I picked it up, I wanted to see what he had on it in the form of text messages and photos. Soon I was scrolling through hundreds of photos, most of them innocent enough, but then I got into the more explicit ones. He had a folder with dozens of images of women in various stages of undress, some performing acts such as playing with themselves. I didn't recognize most of the women, but I did find a few photos of Lacey, as well as some of the same acts. As I continued to look through the photos, I began to recognize some of the women as teachers from the same school Lacey taught at, as well as the wives of several male teachers. Well, this is interesting. It seems Mark is a serial cheater when it comes to other people's wives. Everything was going to end very ugly. I looked through his contact list to see who was there, and decided that these photos, except for my soon-to-be ex-wife, should be shared with everyone on his list. It took me a few minutes to tag and send all these photos to all these people, some of whom were the husbands of the wives he was photographing. When he returns home, a pleasant surprise awaits him. I sent photos and videos of Lacey to her phone, and then from her phone to mine. Those that I later used for my own purposes, you could say blackmail. After turning off his phone, I started gathering all his belongings, clothes, toiletries, and all the other items he had brought for this trip and just casually stuffed them into his suitcase. I also searched his pockets and took all his cash, wallet, credit cards, driver's license, and passport. I knew that without a passport it would be very difficult for him to leave the island. After finishing filling his suitcase, I turned to Lacey. She was still lying face down on the bed, one leg dangling. I very carefully turned her onto her back, then picked her up and carried her to our room. Once there, I placed her on her bed and went back to the room to get all of his things, keeping his phone, wallet, and cash, as I felt like I should get some compensation. After going through his room, I wanted to make sure he had nothing to take with him. I even took his shoes off, and on the way back, found a hotel dumpster, threw his suitcase and shoes in there, and covered them with some garbage so they wouldn't be discovered. Returning to my room, I began packing my suitcase along with Lacey's suitcase as I treated her things with the same care as I did Mark's. I was going to leave her here with nothing but the clothes she was wearing, her purse, and her empty wallet, which only contained the note I left behind. As I finished packing, I noticed that it was already past 4 o'clock in the morning and I needed to be at the airport by 9 o'clock. Since Lacey finished her drink around 2 o'clock in the morning, she would be unconscious until at least noon. Mark, I suspected, would come around at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I would be long gone before either of them woke up. There was one more thing I needed to do. Leaving the room, I grabbed the 2 DVR discs I had recorded earlier and headed towards the rooms where the 2 women and their boyfriends were staying. Very quietly and quickly, I slipped a disc under each door and returned to my room. There I looked at Lacey sleeping peacefully on the bed and was filled with a feeling of great loss and sadness. I wanted so much to have children with her, but she had other plans, and I could not forgive her. I walked around the room to make sure I had everything packed, then grabbed Lacey's suitcase and walked back to the same dumpster where I had thrown Mark's suitcase and added her suitcase. Returning to the room, I searched Lacey's purse to make sure it was empty, and there was no money, no credit cards, no passport. I wanted to make sure that it would be as difficult for her to return home as it was for Mark. Sitting on one of the 2 chairs in the room, I was exhausted, but then thought about what my next move would be when I got home. First, empty our bank and debit accounts, and then cancel all our credit cards. Then I will pack up everything I have and move it out of our house. I was sure I would need to find a storage unit to put everything in, but I didn't care. I just wanted to leave, get out of our house, and out of this sham marriage. Before I knew it, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, it was already almost 7 o'clock in the morning. Pushing myself away from the chair I was sleeping in, I walked over to the bed, took one last sad look at Lacey, then carefully picked her up and carried her out of the room. I went down to the pool and left Lacey on one of the lounge chairs. Since I was checking out, I didn't want her to be in the room when they got there to clean it and prepare it for the next guests. Returning to my room, I grabbed my suitcases, and before leaving, I looked around one last time to make sure I had everything. I still had Mark's phone, but then I had an idea. Back at the pool, I grabbed Lacey's phone and started sending all these photos and videos to everyone on her contact list, with a few exceptions. She had several nieces and nephews who were too young to see such things, but I was sure her mother, father, sisters, and colleagues would find them interesting. I went to the front desk and asked for a piece of tape, after which I took the battery out of her phone, put a very small piece of tape on the contacts, and put the battery back. It will look like her battery is dead. I also made sure she didn't have a phone charging cord. Without money, it would take her some time to get the phone to work. Just after 8 o'clock in the morning, I heard screams and shouts. It was the voice of one of the 2 boyfriends of the women I saw with Mark yesterday. Apparently, the soon-to-be ex-boyfriends watched the video I slipped under their door. "You are a piece of trash! You can tell your family that the wedding is canceled, and I don't want to see you anymore. You'll find your way home yourself," one guy shouted to his girlfriend. The other guy just had a stone-cold expression on his face while his girlfriend pleaded with him. "Baby, please don't leave me. I said I'm very sorry. It was truly a stupid mistake, and besides, you paid him back in full." "You are a traitor. Go back to your new boyfriend. He may have more to offer, but I don't think it'll work as well now," he told her so coldly that I shuddered in fear. I wonder what they did to poor Mark. Well, I guess I'll never know. The next sound I heard was the ambulance siren stopping in front of the building. The one I took to be the manager came out of his office and quickly led the orderlies along the path to Mark's room. I really hoped he was okay. As people began to gather around to see what all the fuss was about, I quietly took a taxi and went to the airport. I turned on my phone and noticed a voicemail. I turned on voicemail and listened to a message from my brother Frank. "Billy, what the hell is going on there? I received a ton of photos and some very detailed videos of Lacey. I mean, I know she's hot, but what's the big deal? Call me when you get this message." Arriving at the airport and waiting to board the plane, I called him back and explained the whole situation, how Lacey slept with Mark while we were on vacation and how she was trying to get pregnant with him. My brother was shocked and at first thought I was joking, but then I told him to look at the video more carefully. He said he was very sorry about what happened and that if I needed anything, I could call him. I thanked him, hung up, and soon found myself on my way back home alone. When I turned on Mark's phone upon landing, I found a dozen voicemails and over 30 messages threatening to harm him. I guess the photos and videos I sent out weren't very popular. After receiving my suitcases, I picked up my car from the long-term parking lot and drove home. Along the way, I began to plan what to do next. Divorce was an option, but I knew that would mean she would get half of everything, and that just didn't suit me. She cheats and yet remains okay with the divorce. It was simply unfair. As I drove, another plan began to form in my head, and I began to make a mental list of what I needed and how to do it. She had ruined our marriage, so I was going to make her life a living hell. When I got home, I called my brother and asked if he could help me move my things out of the house in the next few days. I wanted to do this before Lacey returned to an empty house. Finally, I turned on my phone and found over 20 voicemails and over a dozen messages. Many of them were from Lacey's sister, asking me what was going on and why Lacey wasn't answering her calls. Some of them were from other members of Lacey's family, mostly asking the same questions. I was somewhat relieved that there were no voicemails or text messages from Lacey herself. This meant she couldn't turn on her phone and probably didn't realize what had happened yet. I smiled at the thought that when she finally turned it on, her phone she would see all the texts and voicemails asking her about those photos and videos she sent from her phone. She was in for a very rude surprise. My first order was to cancel all of our credit cards and transfer all of our money from our joint bank account to my personal one. I then started collecting all my clothes as well as other personal items that I wanted to keep. All the gifts Lacey gave me over the years went straight into the trash unless they were worth something. Then I either sold them online or took them to a pawn shop. The home phone was switched off as soon as I arrived home, so anyone trying to contact me would have to call my cell phone. It was around 11 p.m. when I finally looked at my cell phone and saw several texts and voicemails from Lacey. She seemed to be able to get her phone working again. The first few messages were, "Where are you? Why did you leave and leave me here? Are you okay? I think I was robbed." Then the messages changed tone as she realized what had happened, and I am sure she received multiple text messages and voicemails about the photos that had been sent from her phone to everyone in her contacts list. Why? Why did you do this to me? Couldn't we talk first? I simply ignored the rest of her messages, figuring it would only upset her more. The next day was eventful. I had no idea when Lacey would be able to come home, so I had to act quickly. First, I purchased boxes to pack the remaining items and rented a warehouse large enough to hold it all. Then I went to the bank and made sure that there was very little money left in our joint account. I transferred the rest into my business account, which I was going to close, take the money, and run. But there was something else I needed to do before I could leave for good. The house we lived in was a very small starter home. We decided to start small and when our family grew, buy a bigger house. There were simply 2 bedrooms with a small bathroom and a small kitchen, nothing fancy. And with my business doing home improvement and some renovation work, we had high hopes of turning this house into something special. Well, now I had other plans for that. And I was running around the city gathering what I would need to make Lacey's visit one she would never forget. Since I started renovating, I knew a thing or two about construction, load-bearing walls, and so on. Armed with this knowledge, I was going to make some extreme changes to our home, just in a non-traditional way. Later that morning, my brother Frank showed up with his pickup truck, and after some discussion about my situation, we started loading his truck with all my stuff. It took over 5 hours and 3 trips to the warehouse, but by the end of the day, I had officially moved out. I didn't tell Frank about my plans for the house or the surprise that was in store for Lacey. I knew he would try to dissuade me, so I never told him about it. He asked what my plans were for the near future. Just leave town and leave this terrible marriage behind. I'm not going to file for divorce, but when she returns, I won't be here. She may get the house, but that's all she'll get from me. Frank just shook his head. You know this won't work. She'll just hire a lawyer and track you down. Let's just get it over with and divorce this cheater. If you try to escape, you'll only make things worse when she catches up with you. Look, I know you're angry and hurt, but don't let your emotions make your decisions for you. Take heart, find a lawyer, and give her half. No, this bitch cheated on me and tried to have a baby with this idiot, planning to pass him off as mine. She deserves nothing, and this is exactly what she will get. You see, I'm not going to divorce her. Oh no. I'll just leave her with no money in the bank and all her dirty laundry exposed for everyone to see. Frank knew it was useless to persuade me. I tend to be stubborn, and when I get that way, there's little that can change my mind. He left, but not before telling me to think things over and not do anything rash. I've been thinking about everything since the moment I saw her kiss her lover. Now it's time to put my plan into action. That same evening, I started working on the house and worked until the early morning. I still didn't know when Lacey would be back, so I had to act quickly. The only thing that worked in my favor was the snow. Another major storm appeared to be brewing, forcing several major airports to close. Round-trip flights would be canceled, which would give me more time to put the finishing touches on my remodeling project. Another good thing about this storm was the extra 8 to 12 inches of snow it brought. We still had about a foot of it on the ground and roofs, which helped make my plan easier. Since I came back for 2 days, I rarely answered calls as I saw that most of the calls were from Lacey. In the end, I decided to answer her call, but the reason was so that I could get some information from her, nothing more. Oh, baby, please, please listen. It was a mistake, just a huge, stupid mistake on my part. I never wanted it to go this far. I will do whatever it takes, but please forgive me. I heard her crying, but it didn't affect me. I didn't want anything to do with her anymore, but at the moment I needed to stay calm, give her at least a little hope, and then cut it off at the right moment. Lacey, you hurt me more than anyone. I don't know if I can forgive you or trust you ever again. I just want to know why. Why did you do this to me, to us? Didn't you love me? Wasn't I enough for you? I spoke calmly, but with a tinge of sadness in my voice. What I really wanted to do was scream into the phone that she was just a bitch that I never wanted to see again. I should have let her think that we had a chance to get back together. Baby, please let me explain. None of it meant anything, and he didn't mean anything. You mean everything to me. You are my life, the meaning of my life. Please, oh God, please forgive me. She burst into tears. I waited a few minutes, then spoke. Lacey, I just don't know. I loved you, but you broke my heart. I don't think we can fix everything. No, baby, we will fix everything, and we will have an even stronger love, a stronger connection between us if only we can survive this. Please, baby, can you at least wait until I get home so we can talk? I heard the desperation in her voice. I don't know. When are you coming back? Well, there is one problem. I have neither a passport nor a plane ticket now. My sister is transferring some money to me since all my credit cards have been stolen. Oh, that reminds me. Please call these credit card companies and ask them to block my cards immediately. It's amazing how she went from asking me to take her back to ordering me to cancel her credit cards. What a bitch. Okay, I'll do it right now. So you have no idea when you'll be back home? I think in a few days. I talked to the American consulate here and they will issue me a new passport. Call me when you leave. Fine, I will do so. Billy? Yes? I love you. See you when you get home. I hung up. This means that she will return only in a few days. Perfect, I thought. This will give me enough time to make sure my home improvements are done and that I can do a few things to help me start a new life without her. The next day, Frank called to see how I was doing and to invite me to dinner. I agreed since I had not eaten home-cooked food for over a week. I was living on pizza and Chinese food. When I finished talking to Frank, I assured him that I wasn't going to do anything rash. Then Lacey called. "Hey, baby, I just received news that in a couple of days I will be issued a new passport. Now all I need is a plane ticket home. I can be with you in a few days, and if I catch an early flight, I will be home later in the evening. Will you meet me at the airport? I really want us to talk as soon as possible." "This is not a good idea, Lacey. You should ask your sister to pick you up and take you home." I just let her on. By the time she gets home, I'll be at least 100 miles away. "Okay, baby, I love you, and I know that if you give me a chance, we can get through this." "Okay, Lacey, yes, of course, we'll talk and then we'll see. No promises." I lied, just like she once told me. I now had a good idea of when she would be home, which gave me plenty of time to do some more stuff to cover my tracks once I left town. First, I sold my truck, which I use for work, and bought another one, used and in good condition, but registered in a friend's name. Secondly, I had to tell the guys who worked for me that I was closing the business due to my upcoming divorce. I was sorry to leave so quickly, but I couldn't leave without telling them what happened and why. Then I called an old friend from college who now lives in Colorado. When we graduated from college, he said I should come and go into business with him. He said that with all the houses in winter and apartments in summer, we would have work throughout the year. He was happy to hear from me, but surprised by what happened between me and Lacey, since he knew her when we were dating and always thought we were perfect for each other. I asked if he was satisfied with college graduates or if he actually needed a good assistant. He said that now that marijuana laws had changed, his workload had tripled in the last year, and he would be more than happy for me to come and work for him. I asked if it could be unofficial because I wanted Lacey not to find out where I went and not to receive any money from me. Everything was arranged, and all I had to do was leave. Lacey called me several times a day to tell me she loved me and asked me to forgive her. She also gave me daily information about when she would be home, and that when she returned, I would be the only one for her entire life. The day before she came home, I loaded up my new truck and emptied the house of all my stuff. Everything that was left either belonged to Lacey or was crap I didn't care about. I left very early in the morning because I wanted to leave the city without anyone noticing. I told my neighbor across the street to record Lacey's return home as a favor. I told him I would call to let him know when she was coming, as I had a surprise for her. He had no idea what had happened or that she and I were having marital problems and happily agreed, saying that he would expect my call. The next day, everything was ready when I left the city and headed south to my new life without Lacey. It would take me at least 2 days to get to my friend's house, and by then Lacey would already be home. Along the way, I felt less angry and more at peace than I had the previous week. Ever since I saw Lacey and Mark poolside together, I felt like my life had been flushed down the toilet, and now I started to pull myself out of that cesspool of despair. Lacey called around noon and said she would be home tomorrow around 4 p.m. She asked again if I would pick her up at the airport, but I told her I had some things to do and would be back home after her. She can just come in when she gets there. I then called my neighbor and told him to be ready with a video camera to capture the surprise I had in store for my wife. The next day, I was in Colorado and only an hour away from my friend's house when Lacey called. "The house just collapsed, folding in on itself. It must be because of the snow." I had barely inserted the key into the lock and turned it when I suddenly heard a loud crash and the roof fell in. "Oh God, our house is gone," she cried. "Well, Lacey, don't worry. I'm sure your parents are still waiting for you in their room. As for me, I've already taken other measures," I said cheerfully. "What are you talking about? Our house is gone. How can you be so happy now?" She was starting to get angry. "Fine, my renovation went just as I planned. I arranged it so that the house collapsed in on itself when you unlocked the door. I set up temporary bracing in the basement and then used a chainsaw to cut off all the nails in the floor. The lock on the front door was connected to a switch that turned on a winch that I bought very cheaply at a pawn shop. Then, using a pulley and some ropes attached to temporary supports, as soon as you turned the key, the winch turned on, and our house collapsed. You see, dear, our house didn't just collapse on its own because of the snow. I had a hand in it. You see, I did to our house what you did to our marriage. Good luck in your search for a new home. As for me, I have almost reached my new home." At that moment, I reset it and called my neighbor. "Billy, you won't believe what happened. Your house just collapsed. I guess it couldn't handle all that snow, but there didn't seem to be much of it, at least not enough to cause that much damage. Look, I videotaped the whole thing, and luckily your wife is okay. She was trying to open the door when it all happened, and it was like bang, and it just fell in on itself." He was so excited. I told him to email me the video when he got a chance and that I would like to keep a copy of it. After talking with him, I turned off my phone and continued on my way to a new life. It's been almost 3 years now, and I've built a comfortable life for myself here in Colorado. I keep in touch with a few friends in Minnesota and keep an eye on what's going on. I didn't want to contact any of the family members directly because I was sure they would tell Lacey where I lived. It looks like Lacey got her wish and got pregnant with Mark's baby. For a while, she told everyone that the child was mine and that I couldn't remain a father, so I ran away like a coward. Even my mother believed her only because she wanted to have a grandson. I contacted a friend who in turn contacted my brother and told him to ask Lacey to do a DNA test on the baby with my brother. If I was the father, then there would be a match with my brother, and if it wasn't me, then there would be no coincidence. Like an idiot, she agreed. When the results came back, my mother kicked her out of the house, screaming at her to never show up at the door with her child. As for Mark, it looks like he was badly hurt by those two guys at the resort and spent over a week in the hospital before he was able to return home. When he finally reached the house, there were several other gentlemen, or should I say ex-husbands, waiting to add to his injuries. He has since left town for an unknown destination, but there are rumors that he can no longer have sex. I think his days as a player are over. Thanks for tuning in to this intense story of betrayal and revenge. What would you do if you found yourself in Billy's shoes? Do you think his actions were justified, or did he go too far? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more jaw-dropping stories. See you next time.